Good morning. Welcome to the Thursday, May 9th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. This is a land use meeting, and we do begin each of our meetings with an invocation. Today, Commissioner Geithner will lead us in that. If you would like to join, please do so.
Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to gather this morning, to live in the great nation, state, and county that we do, that we can be here and all participate together in the governance of our community. Lord, I want to especially ask for guidance and wisdom and for fairness today as we hear our land use items. And Lord, I ask for your blessing and protection over our military, our police and fire, and for all of our community to live in peace and harmony. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Commissioner Williams, will you please lead us in the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And before we move on, we do need to excuse Commissioner Gonzalez. Can I have a motion for that, please?
I'll make a motion to excuse Commissioner Gonzalez.
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Commissioner Gonzalez is excused with a vote of 4-0. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is staff emergency items, and I'm unaware of any staff emergency items today.
Item 4.
Item number 4 is changes, postponements, and notice of the next meeting. I'm unaware of any changes or postponements to today's agenda, and the next meeting will be Tuesday, May 14th at 9:00 a.m.
Thank you. Item number 5.
Item number 5 is public comment on items not scheduled on the agenda. This is the public's opportunity to speak on an item that is not scheduled on today's agenda. And Madam Chair, I'm unaware of anyone signing in for public comment today.
Thank you. As was said by the clerk to the board, this is an opportunity to speak on any item not on today's agenda. Do we have anyone here to speak on any item other than those printed? Okay, hearing none in the room. Any online? Thank you. Item number 6.
Item number 6 is the land use consent calendar consisting of items 6A through 6G.
Are there any members of the public here wishing to speak on any item on today's consent calendar? I do believe we had one signed in. Please come on down, sir.
Morning. Thank you for hearing me. I live in Apex Ranch. The overlook at Homestead is going in right behind our property. One of the things I don't agree with is a parking lot that's supposed to go into Homestead right through that housing area. That's going to create a lot more traffic, wear and tear on the roads, and the potential of homeless and then other crime, in that neighborhood. That's my biggest concern.
Okay, are there any questions that could be, at this point, it has been fully heard. Would you like us to address any further questions, or would you like to just place on the record your comments at this point?
Place on the record my comments. I'm not sure if that can be, taken away from this particular project, but that's our biggest concern right now.
Commissioner Geithner.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So you're saying the parking lot for the Homestead Park in particular?
From my understanding, at the end of Apex Ranch Road, I live in a cul-de-sac, okay? My road actually is now going to be a throughway into that housing development. And then it's going to turn to the east and into West End, connect with Homestead Park. From my understanding, there's supposed to be a parking lot going there, and I'm not sure how big that parking lot's going to be. I'm sure it's for the public, possibly for trailers, horses, things of that nature. But my biggest concern is not only the traffic coming through the area, but again, the potential for the homeless to camp out there and maybe any additional crime.
Okay, I'll just have some questions for staff.
Okay. Okay, I think we do have some questions for staff as we consider whether we'll pull this item from the consent calendar. Thank you, Ms. Bagley.
And I'm sorry, sir, what was your name?
Brian Morse.
Brian.
Brian with an I, Morse as Morse code.
Okay.
Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you. So I just want to get some clarification on the continuation of the road. Can you just kind of give me the lay of the land, so to speak, on what the plans have been this road for this road? Has this is this truly a cul-de-sac? Is it just been temporarily ended? What is the situation on that road?
So I do have a PowerPoint pulled up if we could get that on the screen, and it would show, here we go. You can see the plat right here. This is overlook at Homestead. This is Apex Ranch. When Apex Ranch was platted, the road did show a continuation to the south. So it was never supposed to be like a permanent cul-de-sac.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Commissioner Geithner?
It does answer my question. I just do want to put kind of a comment on the record here. Obviously, Homestead Park is a lovely park that many people frequent, and I'm unaware of any issues with homelessness or camping in that area. There's currently a parking lot. It's currently being used, and I've not heard of any concerns of that area. So obviously appreciate you bringing your concerns, and I wanted to make sure I kind of had I knew one of the answers on the homelessness issue because that's has not been an issue that I'm aware of at this point, but I wanted to get the clarification on the road. So with that, I'm satisfied, and I don't feel like we need to pull this item off unless obviously there are others who do.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Geithner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Did you have a comment?
Yes, please.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have an interest in pulling it off the consent calendar either, but I do, because we do have a citizen here that has made some comments, and perhaps this is already ongoing, so I'm just kind of checking if that citizen can continue to work with the county and continue to work with the developer to express their concerns, because often there can be effective solutions provided that don't necessarily impact the development itself, and so forth and so on. So I just encourage people to continue that communicating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. On the same item. I'm sorry, say that again. Okay. Thank you. I will ask if there's anyone else here wishing to speak on any item on the consent calendar today. Sir, if you would let us know which item number.
I'm not sure which item number. It is part of the parking lot and the trailhead that was never mentioned in any of the meetings. None of us were privy to what was going on. This is like a change that we were not aware of as far as the Apex Ranch community is involved in. It's development with the PTO overlook as far as the parking lot and the trailhead. This was never mentioned previously. Additionally, we're against the access roads coming in when they already have a north and a south entrance of their development. They're basically overrunning our small closed community and allowing access to the public. And when we're a smaller community, and they're 3 times the size of us, I don't understand why just because they're a developer, they're allowed to come in and open our community up to the public.
Okay, so for the record, it sounds like you were here to speak also on 6G. And did you state your name for the record, sir?
Yeah, it's Travis Campbell. I'm
Thank you.
Lot 20 where the cul-de-sac is currently at, and basically a road's going to be in my front yard. So we're not really, I've written several letters for this to be addressed. Some items have been addressed and some have not.
Commissioner Geithner, as the resident commissioner, are you still feeling satisfied with what's been presented?
I think the first gentleman stated that he wanted to have his comments on the record. if this road has been planned, prior to these other developments, I'm not saying that there's a likelihood that, based on the Planning Commission vote and what I've heard, that there's likely to be a change there. I think, when roads are planned, it's unfortunate that you were unaware of that, but at the same point, that's would be a huge burden on the applicant as well to ask them to change something that has been kind of in the works for a long time. So I don't see that we need to pull this item off for a full hearing. If those are the items that are being heard, I'm still comfortable with moving forward. I understand that it is, when you're unaware of things that are happening in your community, or you didn't feel like that was straightforward to you, that is concerning, but it was on the plans, and I have to think about both sides of the equation here when we have folks who have gone through the process, met the criteria, and have clearly, been working off of the reality of that going through. I don't see that a full hearing is going to change that. So I am comfortable with moving forward on the consent. I'm not opposed to having, I just, for the sake of everyone's time, I do not think it is likely, the facts that have been presented are likely to change by having a full
Why are they
hearing.
not already using the easements and the roads that are already available to them? There's already one north of Apex Ranch Road that's already currently there that they want to shut down and create the access into Apex Ranch. That road's already there. Why are they not using it?
Sir, I'm sorry, it's just not appropriate for us to continue down having a dialogue. If we're going to, again, if we're going to have a full hearing, then the applicant needs to have the opportunity to have the fair process. So I don't want to continue down a dialogue on this.
And what about the parking lot and the trailhead that was never mentioned? Now it's being mentioned now, and that was never brought to our community. So we were never allowed to appeal that.
If we want to pull it off and have a full hearing, I am happy to do that so we can have these full discussions.
I would appreciate it.
But I'm just saying, it does not seem that the facts are likely to change the outcome. So I will leave it to the rest of the board on what they want to do. But I do not feel like at this point, again, I don't want to get into a back and forth because we have a very specific legal process so that everyone gets to have a fair hearing, and that's required in this room. So
But the developer's not following it.
Sir. And so I don't want to, I'm happy to make additional comments on the record, but I don't want to get into a back and forth and leave the applicant in a position where they do not have a fair hearing.
Okay. I think what we'll do at this point is, Ms. Bagley, I did see you get up ready to answer this gentleman's question. Let's see if that can provide some clarity, and we'll go from there, deciding whether to pull it off.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bagley.
I just wanted to clarify that the gentleman who just spoke, he said that they had access to the north, and why isn't that being utilized? So there is a driveway just north of Apex Ranch. It is not owned by the owner who owns Overlook. So I don't believe that was an option to use that existing driveway to access this new development.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. The resident commissioner has said we can proceed with this on the consent calendar. Are the other commissioners good with proceeding?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on any item on today's land use consent calendar, item 6? Okay, hearing none and none online. Thank you, sir. Comments, motion from the board? Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you. I do just want to put a little bit of comment on the record here. It's very important that we get fair hearings in this building. There's a very specific process where we allow applicants to speak when we do a full hearing, and that's why I didn't want to get into a back and forth situation. I think, again, I'm always sympathetic to residents' concerns and hearing what they have to say, but Oftentimes, there are things that have been in the works for many years even, and folks are unaware. But we have to consider, but we do have to consider the long-term planning in these situations. These are public roads. No one owns them outside of the full public, and the public has the right to be able to utilize those roads. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that the planning has been in place for these roads for a very long time. This is not something new. It's I can't speak to, I hear words like they never told me. I don't know who they was, if it's a realtor, if it's a previous, when people move in. I can't control for all of those factors, but I do know what has been in the works and in the plan. And so for that reason, again, I don't think that we are likely to hear new information that wasn't presented previously, and so I am comfortable with leaving that on the consent and being in support of that item.
Okay. Any other comments?
I did get the assessor's database pulled up finally onto my phone, and I can see where that has been planned in. I can see where Commissioner Geithner is talking about, where that has seemed to have been planned for many years. There's an easement, it appears, through the cul-de-sac belonging to this property. And so I'm comfortable keeping it on the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. With that, Commissioner Geithner.
Can I just,
Sure.
I'm going to request, because we've gotten so far down on the road on the discussion on this at this point, as I talked about, we really need a fair process for a hearing. So with so many additional comments, I'm going to say, let's go ahead and do the full hearing. Let's give the applicant their opportunity to speak and, tell us their side. I don't want to have an unfair process in this, so I'm going to request that we pull it from the consent.
Okay, thank you. For the record, we will be pulling item 6G to be heard up under item number 7. And so do we have the applicant here? Excellent. Okay, with that, any other comments on the rest of the consent calendar from the board?
Does 6G need to be pulled off by motion? Okay, I move to pull off the item 6G off of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
That has been moved and seconded. Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf?
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 4-0 with Commissioner Gonzalez excused. So any other comments or motion from commissioners on the land use, the remainder of the items on the land use consent calendar? Hearing none, can I have a motion, please?
I move we approve items 6A through 6F.
Second?
That has been moved and seconded. Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf?
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 4-0 with Commissioner Gonzalez excused. That brings us to item number 7.
Item number 7 is the called up consent calendar, which includes item number 6G from the consent calendar. Preliminary plan overlook at Homestead, a request by NES Inc. for approval of a preliminary plan consisting of 346.55 acres to create 62 single-family residential lots. The property is zoned RR5 residential rural and is located 1/2 mile north of the intersection of Elbert Road and Sweet Road and 1/2 mile south of the intersection of Elbert Road and Hopper Road. The item was heard on the called up consent agenda at the April 18th, 2024 Planning Commission hearing. The Planning Commission requested the item be heard on the called up consent agenda to discuss drainage issues related to the topography of the proposed preliminary plan application. A member of the public spoke in opposition to the project, specifically to the placement of the proposed drainage ponds in relationship to his property. The preliminary plan application was unanimously recommended for approval with a vote of 7-0. Parcel numbers 41000000255, 256, and 41220000005. Commissioner District 2, file SP 238, Kylie Bagley, Planner 3, Planning and Community Development.
Thank you, Ms. Bagley.
Good morning, Kylie Bagley, planner with El Paso County. I'm here to present on item number SP 238, which is overlook at Homestead Preliminary Plan. I apologize, the slide's incorrect. Daniel Torres is the engineer on this project, and if you have any questions for traffic and drainage, he'll be happy to answer those as we move through. In front of you is the preliminary plan criteria of approval. You do have those laid out in front of you as well as in your staff reports. So the request in front of you is a request by NES for approval of a preliminary plan consisting of 346.55 acres to create 62 single-family residential lots. The property is currently zoned RR5, so each lot would have to be a minimum of 5 acres in that zoning district. And the property is located 1/2 mile north of the intersection of Elbert Road and Sweet Road. On April 18th, the item was heard by the Planning Commission with a recommendation of approval with a 7-0 vote. A member of the public did speak in opposition of this project. Specifically, he was opposed to the placement of the drainage ponds that the overlook was proposing. In front of you is just the vicinity map. As you can see, it is the 346 acres. To the east is Homestead Park. To the west is the Apex Ranch, and then south of it is more RR5 single-family development. So currently our map shows it as A35, but it was rezoned by the Board of County Commissioners to RR5 on January 11th of this year. So it does have adjacent zoning as PUD, and then again some RR5 to the south, and then A35 in Homestead Park, as I mentioned previously. The master plan place type is rural. So the rural place type does state that residential lot development that occurs within the rural place type typically covers 35 acres or more per 2 units, with the minimum lot area consisting of 5 acres per unit. So the proposed 5-acre lots would be consistent with the rural place type. The character for the area of change. So the character for the surrounding area is consistent with the area of change designation, which identifies that existing vacant land use may be developed in the future. So it is, and I apologize, it's minimal change undeveloped is that area of change. So since the subject property is surrounded primarily by developed land, it is unlikely that the character of this area would change with this preliminary plan. And then I'd like to ask Daniel Torres to come up to go over drainage at this point.
Good morning, Commissioners. Daniel Torres with Engineering. In terms of drainage, the property is not located within a FEMA floodplain. The parcels are located within 4 different drainage basins, and the development is proposing 6 private full spectrum detention ponds that will mitigate the site's developed flows. In terms of transportation, access will be provided via the existing Apex Ranch Road and a new roadway that they're proposing about 1/2 mile south of that. Traffic study was submitted that identified some shoulder improvements to that new roadway intersection that they're proposing. And I do want to point out again that the existing Apex Ranch Road had platted right-of-way for the extension of those roadways into this overlook subdivision on the south side and on this north side right here. Finally, road impact fees do apply to this development. Any questions regarding drainage or transportation?
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So before I ask the applicant to come up, I was hoping it would be okay to ask Commissioner Williams what you were looking up on the assessor website so I could pull that up and we can get that into the record as part of this hearing.
What I was trying to look at on the assessor's website was to get into EDARP, so now I'm into EDARP, so
Okay.
I can look at the actual record. This is S as in Sam, P as in Paul, 238 is what we're looking at, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that way I can also look on my phone to see things. Thank you.
I'll just go ahead and pull it up so we have it for the record.
Thank you, Ms. Bagley.
If I can say, doing the full presentation helps solve a lot of these problems.
Let's see if this.
And Chair, if I could also ask, where is the specific cul-de-sac that these gentlemen were referring to?
So I think one gentleman lives, is it this property?
Okay, those
Lives
two
on this
lots.
end of Apex Road, yes.
Got it.
And then if we pull up the satellite, you can see that they have a temporary cul-de-sac here.
Yes.
And so I believe what you were mentioning earlier, Commissioner Williams, was that it does show on the assessor's website this road continuing.
And that's what I needed to see.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant up, Andrea Barlow with NES. Refresh it.
Good morning, Commissioners. Andrea Barlow with NES representing PT Overlook LLC. Let me get I am not going to do my full presentation because I think Ms. Bagley's presentation covered some of the, I don't know how to get this going. Okay, let me just, covered some of the broader aspects, but I do want to focus on the specific questions. Thank you, whoever did that. So we are doing 62 rural residential lots on a property that was previously rezoned to RR5 a few months ago. And this is the location of the site. It's 4 parcels that surrounds Apex Ranch Estates, and it has the Riata subdivision to the east and south with Homestead Park to the northeast. This just shows the development we're proposing. We're going to do 2 filings, and the access that was referred to along the northern boundary, which is here, that is utilized by the existing ranch that is on the property, but that is an easement. It straddles a section line, so half of it to the south is owned by Apex Ranch, and to the north is owned by Mr. Keeley, who owns this property here. So my client doesn't have any ownership of that access, and also to create an access there, there is a creek running through here, so it would require a substantial creek crossing. There are wetlands and so on, so it's quite a challenging street crossing to accomplish. Plus, and I'm going to talk about this in a bit more detail, we have the 2 connections from Apex Ranch, which is public right-of-way, and we are proposing what will ultimately be our main entrance here off Elbert Road on the south. So we did have a neighborhood meeting back in November. To be fair to the residents who are here, at that time, we were primarily talking about the rezone. We did have a plan, but it wasn't developed to the level that's required for a preliminary plan submittal. So we weren't at that point showing the parking that they're referring to, so I will talk a little bit about that. We talked, one of the questions is about the roads. Why are you coming through Apex Ranch Estate? So I mentioned the fact that the northern access, it really isn't suitable or available. There were questions about construction traffic. That is going to be limited to the Elbert Road access. It won't be coming through Apex Ranch. And then I just wanted to show a little bit more detail of how the Apex Ranch was actually platted. So this is the northern access. Well, let's start here. This is the cul-de-sac that the gentleman were referring to. That's the temporary cul-de-sac. This is platted right-of-way all the way to the boundary, so it was always intended to go south into this property. Similarly, the one on the north side is platted to the edge of the boundary, so that was always intended as public right-of-way to access that adjacent parcel. And go into a bit more detail, first of all, we have a section in code which says where there are more than 25 lots, access to a dead-end road means there should be a second point of access. So we are required to have more than one point of access. And then, more significantly, divisions of land shall be designed to accommodate the continuation of roads, trails, pedestrian access, utilities and drainage facilities into adjacent property, unless there is sufficient justification for an alternative design. So that's how Apex Ranch was planned, to allow access into the adjacent property we're now considering. And similarly, we are proposing, oh, that arrow's got moved off a bit. Oh, go back. That arrow moved, but here is our access to this adjoining property with a temporary cul-de-sac, and the same here. We have access shown there with a temporary cul-de-sac. Similarly, the Rialto subdivision shows access into this adjacent parcel and access in this direction. So that's standard planning practice in the county to continue access for public roads into adjacent properties. So I won't get too much into traffic and drainage. I didn't think that was the main question. So let's talk a little bit about the parking. So the parking that's been referred to is just here. There's 12 spaces. That's the location of the mailboxes for the community. So it's intended to provide parking so people can get their mail. There's also a cistern proposed on the property in that location for the fire department for water, so provides them access to that. In addition, through discussions with El Paso County Parks, we are providing a trail through the property. It is part of the Parks Master Plan. This tract here within Apex Ranch is identified on their plat as for public trail access. And we are proposing then to continue that through this subdivision. And then we are providing a tract here to connect directly into Homestead Park. So yes, do we anticipate some people will park there to access the Homestead Park? Possibly, probably. It isn't horse trailer parking, it's just standard car vehicle parking. This whole community is going to be controlled by a metropolitan district, which is going to have covenants and so on and so forth in place. So nobody's going to be allowed to park there illegally for any length of time, and it's going to be controlled through the covenants, just as any other HOA or Metro District would control activities in the community. And I think really there were a few other questions that neighbours had, which we addressed, and we wanted to show that we'd addressed everything that came up at the neighbourhood meeting. But I really want to just focus on the comments that were made by the two neighbours who came today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Williams.
So is the current Apex Ranch Estates PUD, are those 5-acre lots?
No, they're not. They range from about 3.5, I think it's about just over 3 acres up to something about 7 acres or something in that range. So they average 5 acres, but there are smaller lots there, yes.
And then the newer subdivision, is that going to be 5-acre lots? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
it was rezoned to RR5 with the intent to do 5 or more acres.
Okay.
On this parcel. So it's compatible with the surrounding. The Rialto subdivision to the south is 5-acre lots.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that we've at least had some residents express some concern about the amount of traffic that might be going through the area. So has there been a traffic analysis or traffic study done? And
Yeah,
I don't know if that needs to...
I can go back to the slides on that.
Yeah, just
so we did do a traffic study to accompany the project. There are this shows the analysis of the current trips versus the trips after development. This is at the peak AM and PM time. There's very limited traffic on Apex Ranch Road currently, 5 trips. It will increase potentially after the development, but the majority of the trips, I think, which is Hatband Drive is the new road coming off Elbert here, the majority of trips will be coming through that main entrance rather than going through Apex Ranch. I mean, if you're wanting to head south, which we're assuming most people will want to do from this development, you're going to come down to this access rather than coming up through Apex Ranch to then come south. So there may be some people who going north, especially in this part of the property, that may want to take that route, but it is a public street. It's been planned as a public street with the connections that we're showing.
Thank you.
But generally very low traffic volumes for 62 lots.
Are there any further questions for the applicant at this time? We have a process, and I'll call on any public comment in just a minute. So thank you, sir. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Does that complete the applicant and staff presentations on this item? Okay. With that, I will call for anyone here in support of this application today. Are there any members of the public here in support of this application? And any online? Okay, thank you. We will move on then to anyone here in opposition of this application. If you could please come forward, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. You're welcome to combine your time if you would like to. Again, this is anyone in opposition of this application.
My question was in reference to...
Hold on, sir, 1 second. We'll have you introduce yourself again. Sorry, it's for the record, and we'll start the timer. And if you could speak into the microphone, we can make sure we capture everything.
Again, Brian Morse with Apex Ranch right there at the cul-de-sac.
Okay, and before we start the timer, I think we've been asked to pull up something.
You want to see the plan?
The slide showing the red line for the trailhead and the public access.
All right. If you can bring my presentation up again, I can get to that slide.
Oh, sorry, the AV booth cannot hear unless it's through the microphone. So would you mind pulling up the applicant's presentation, please, on this item again?
Okay, thank you.
And she's driving with the cursor. Thank you.
That one?
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay, you have the red and white dashed line.
Speak into the microphone for me, sir. Thank you.
You have the red and white dashed line that you said is public access. From my understanding, that was HOA or owned by the Apex Ranch HOA. How would that be public access?
So can you repeat your question for us, and we'll make sure that that can be answered in the next stage.
That easement that they're showing public access, from my understanding, that property is owned by the Apex Ranch HOA. How would that be public access?
Okay, I'm sure that that can be addressed and your question answered. Do you have any other comments that you'd like to make?
I'm not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself. Again, for the record.
Good morning. Thank you
Thank
again.
you.
Travis Campbell of Lot 20 on Apex Ranch. Additionally, I believe that their traffic numbers are skewed in their favor. 80 homes with both communities times 2 cars is 160 a day. Then you have plus FedEx, you have plus Amazon, UPS, mail service vehicles, and now possibly 10 to 20 horse trailers coming in and out of that community is way more than what that they're giving you. The numbers just don't add up on how many homes that are going to be there with both communities. Additionally, if the road is going to be allowed, I would like at least a couple wide speed bumps between the communities because of the topography coming down that hill. I don't want cars, trucks coming past our house doing 40, 50 miles an hour in my front yard. That's a safety for my kids, grandkids, our service dogs as well. And finally, how are they going to keep construction out of Apex community? And if they don't, what is our recourse as a community if they don't abide by that? And basically, we're just asking for a proposal from them. If they want a parking lot and they want a trailhead in their subdivision, then they should leave our community out of it because it opens up our community. We only have like 18 homes here. Now there's going to be over 60 plus, so that means, adds up to like 80. So that's a lot more traffic, and especially if it's a public trailhead. The numbers they probably can't even explain because who knows how many people are going to be there on a given day or a given weekend. So I just ask for those considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of this application at this time? Okay. With that, would the applicant like to answer any of those questions and provide a rebuttal?
Yes, I'll start with the first question, if I can find my slide. There it is. So this is the track table that went along with the plat. These are tracks D and E. Oh, okay, sorry. My cursor is going crazy. These, if you see what I'm pointing to, yes. This is tract D and E. And as you can see, per the track table, they are proposed for private or public trails. So they were always intended to have public trails going through those two tracks to provide a trail connection. Okay, don't know what's, okay, I'm not doing any of this, by the way. Okay. So they have been platted with tracks for public trail access. So they have always been intended to be a public trail. The County Parks Master Plan has on their trails master plan a trail coming through this property to access Homestead Park. So it is owned by the HOA, yes, but it is owned as a tract that's platted for public trail access. Now on to the traffic questions. The figures shown here are just the peak hour. So that's the peak morning hour and the peak PM hour. The traffic study actually looks at total trips, and the total trips assumed are much greater than the gentleman suggested. It's not 2 trips per home per day, it's 10 trips per home per day, which is 9 point something. That is the International Transportation Engineering figure for a single family home, that based on an average over many surveys, that there are an average of almost 10 trips to and from a single family home per day. So that is what the traffic study is based on. So these trips that are shown here are not intended to represent the entire day. They are just at the peak hour. The peak hour is determined by analyzing the traffic that's on the surrounding road network, primarily Albert Road in this case, identifying when the highest volumes of traffic are in the morning and the evening, and then analyzing what traffic this development will be putting on the road at that time when the rest of the network is at its peak. So that's the purpose of the traffic study. This is not intended to represent the total trips per day of the development. It is just the peak hour trips. So I hope that clarifies that point. And then regarding construction traffic going through the development, it will be quite simply a case of putting up barriers during construction into Apex, to the 2 connections to Apex Ranch, and that they won't be opened up until construction is completed.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
So construction traffic will probably go in through Hat Band Drive?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And at the right moment, not necessarily at this moment, but I would like comments from the staff with regard to the traffic analysis. So is the proposed design adequate for the expected traffic and so forth and so on?
Okay, I think we'll address that in the next stage once the
We can address that in the next
hearing
stage, yes,
portion is closed. Okay, any
That's it
further
for me.
questions?
Nope.
Okay,
Nothing for me.
thank you.
Thanks.
At this point, I will declare the public hearing portion of this hearing closed, and we will move along to any further questions of staff at this point.
Daniel Torres again with engineering. In terms of the traffic study, they followed the criteria, as Ms. Marlowe indicated. It is per the ITE, which is the Institute of Traffic Engineers, which identifies the traffic generated by each of these homes. So they followed all the criteria, and it is what she's stating here in terms of peak hour trips and everything. The roadways are able to handle the traffic that they're proposing.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff at this point? Okay. Commissioner Geithner, do we have any comments as we move forward here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate taking the time to go through the entire hearing, and I hope that this helps some of the individual residents here as well with some of their questions and concerns. I am satisfied with the answers we've gotten from both our staff related to the traffic study. We rely on our staff here and our criteria, and the key words here that just came from a staff member are the applicant met the criteria. In these hearings, it's our responsibility to make sure that when applicants and landowners meet the criteria, that we are approving those items. And that is quite simply because they have rights to utilize their land as long as they are meeting the criteria around traffic, around safety, around health. And that's why we hear these in relationship to those criteria. I've said so many times from this dais when we talk about land use items, I grew up in a rural area, and I watched the area change as I grew up. And it looks very different today than when I was there. Those changes can be difficult, but I think it's very important in this process that when we talk about fairness and what that means in a quasi-judicial hearing, that we take preferences out and we look at the criteria and we look at when an applicant meets that criteria, that we do not infringe upon their rights as landowners. That's not always easy. And I certainly, again, I understand your concerns. I think, to be clear, and I do think the parking lot is described a bit differently by the applicant than what was initially described. But to be clear, in the event, and this is the case now and in the future, that we have problems like homeless camping, I can't imagine that a small parking lot is going to draw in more homeless than what a current park already would, and it's not a very conducive area to homelessness. There's just not enough resources out there for that. But in the event that something like that would happen, our sheriff's office is going to respond. We've been very responsive to homeless issues in this county, and we do not allow those to linger in any area. So I'm going to just say, in the event, and I think it's unlikely, but in the event that any of those items could take place, that's going to be something that the county is going to be happy to step in and deal with. So I want to assure the residents of that. The road situation, again, I am always very sympathetic. I understand when you don't know something is going to happen, but again, in fairness to the applicant, they have done what the county has asked them to do to develop this property in terms of the continuation of roads. It would be unfair for me today to say, you did what we asked you to do in the criteria, and yet we're going to deny that. So for all of those reasons, though, again, I understand the difficulties of watching communities change. This has been planned for a very long time, and in fairness to the applicant, I believe they have met the criteria that was presented very clearly, and so for that reason, I'm going to move approval of this item with any conditions and notations.
I will go ahead and second that. I just have a few comments. I know it's unfortunate the HOA has been taking care of that land that might not be theirs, because it's apparent on the Apex Ranch Estates PUD that is a, land that has been dedicated for a county trail. And so that's just sometimes misunderstandings happen, and that's appreciated that they have been taking care of that. The other thing, the only other comment I have, it is frustrating when homes come in behind your house that you don't expect. It is frustrating when you purchase a property or purchase an existing home that you do not always know what's going to happen in that area. That is something we continually work with the real estate industry with, and I know that our real estate board continually works with their real estate agents to try and get them to say this is what could possibly happen behind your house. And it's not necessarily dedicated open space. It could become houses behind your house. This cul-de-sac could extend. And unfortunately, in the real estate world, it's really hard to control 3,000 real estate agents. And so I wanted to stress those things. And actually, the only concern I really had, which has to be addressed by the United States Postal Service, is the location of the mailboxes. I think that those 12 parking spaces with those mailboxes right next to them are going to be a problem. Living in an HOA myself, where the mailboxes are not located at a very good place, those mailboxes could very easily be tampered with. And that's a whole different problem to resolve by the neighborhood and by the Metro District when that is formed, and to see if there's actually a better location to put those 12 mailboxes so that they don't have their mail stolen or their boxes damaged. And so I approve of this. It is a private property land use matter. The developer has met the standards that are set out in our land use development process. So thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners? Okay. I'm going to just wrap it up also by saying that the commissioners, for different types of land use items and plans that come to us, we have different criteria. And when we pulled this off the consent calendar, I made sure that everybody had the criteria for preliminary plan approval in front of us, just as a reminder. And I find too that all the criteria have been met by this application. I appreciate, as always, residents coming and letting us know what's working, what isn't, to be aware of future issues, and I appreciate those having been addressed through the meeting of the criteria. At this point, if there are no other comments from the board, I will call for a vote. There has been a motion and a second. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 4-0. Okay. That was item number 7. We are now moving into item number 8.
Item number 8 is the final plat, Hay Creek Valley subdivision, a request by View Homes Incorporated for approval of a final plat for the Hay Creek Valley subdivision to create 20 single-family residential lots and 3 tracts. The site is 214.62 acres, zoned RR5, residential rural, 5-acre minimum lot size, and located south of the town of Monument, adjacent to Hay Creek Road. The item was heard on the called-up consent agenda at the April 18, 2024 Planning Commission hearing. Members of the public spoke in opposition to the proposed final plat. Concerns included adding additional lots in the area, inadequate access, and traffic. The motion to approve the final plat failed with a vote of 3-5, resulting in a recommendation of denial. Parcel numbers 71000, 267, 268, 269, 270, 71330-00001, and 71330-07014. Commissioner District Number 3, File SF 2324, Kylie Bagley, Planner 3, Planning and Community Development.
Thank you. And we do have a process that we will follow with this item as well. And just as a heads up, so that we can make sure we keep the testimony portion together and are not breaking that up at all, I think what I'll do is ask the staff presentation and the applicant presentation to proceed. And before we move on to the support and opposition portion, we'll take a quick restroom break at that point. Thank you.
Good morning, Kylie Bagley, planner with El Paso County. I'll be presenting on item SF 2324, which is the Hay Creek Valley Final Plat subdivision. Edward Schoenheit was the engineer on this project, so when we get to drainage and traffic, he will address those slides as we go through this presentation. In front of you is the criteria for approval of a final plat. It's about 14 items for that approval, and you have that in front of you as well and was provided to you in your staff reports. So for some background on this request, on October 12th, 2023, the Board of County Commissioners approved the preliminary plan for Hay Creek Valley. The current request by View Homes, Inc. is for a final plat to create 20 single-family residential lots and 3 tracts. The property is currently zoned to RR5. The lots will be 5 acres or greater in order to meet that residential zoning district. And then the property does consist of 214 acres. In front of you are just the previously approved waivers that were approved with that preliminary plan. So I'll go ahead and read those off. So the first was a waiver for the Land Development Code section 8.4.4.c, which waives the requirement for public roads and allows for private roads to service the proposed subdivision. The second is for a waiver of section 6.3.3.c, which waives the requirement for 2 access routes. And section 6 in the Land Development Code is for fire. So on April 18th, the Planning Commission did have this item presented to them. There was a motion for approval, which was denied. So this project was recommended for denial with a 3-5 vote. The Planning Commissioners felt that fire safety regarding ingress and egress was not met. And then members of the public spoke in opposition as well, again, to traffic, ingress, egress. So in front of you is just the vicinity map of the property. So it does consist of 6 currently platted lots. It is north of the United States Air Force Academy. Right here is I-25. This is Baptist Road and then Hay Creek Road. Again, that waiver was granted so that this subdivision would be serviced by a private road. And then as you can see, the property is surrounded by RR5, some PUD to the north, and then A35 to the east. So it currently is within the large lot residential place type of our master plan. The large lot residential place type does state that development in this area does typically consist of single family homes occupying lots of 2.5 acres or more, and then keeping that rural aesthetic in this area. So again, this subdivision is requesting 5 acre or greater lots. It is within the area of change, minimal change developed. So developed areas of minimal change are likely built out, but may include isolated pockets of vacant or underutilized land. So this subdivision, again, is just requesting to do those 5 acre or greater lots within the RR5 zoning district, which is pretty consistent with the zoning that that surrounds this subject property as well. And then for our master plan key area, it is within the military buffer. So again, the United States Air Force Academy is just to the south. It's also within the Tri-Lakes area, which just talks about future development in this area should align with the existing character. And then I'd like to invite Schoenheit down to go over transportation and drainage.
Morning, Commissioners. Ed Schoenheit, Department of Public Works. Just on the transportation side, property is located off Hahee Creek Road, that's the main road that heads back over to 25. That's a county-maintained paved rural major collector road. And then access is going to be provided to this subdivision through a small portion of an adjacent property with a already recorded access easement that then provides access into the new private road that will be built for the subdivision itself. The road will terminate in a full designed cul-de-sac at the end. That was with fire district's input to have that. There'll also be a cistern at the end of that cul-de-sac as well. The private road will have intersection improvements, primarily with the alignment of the private road to Hay Creek Road because it was a little bit acute, and so that will be improved. A transportation study was done for the development, and with the addition of basically from the current 4 lots that are, or 6 lots that already are now to the 20 lot for the planned subdivision, additional 16 lots. That's been determined to generate approximately an additional 218 daily trips to the surrounding road network. No road improvements are planned for Hay Creek Road itself. We did look at the capacity for Hay Creek Road based off its cross-section and its classification. With its design, even though it doesn't have shoulders, but it is a full width road, design capacity has been determined based on the classification of about 3,000 average daily trips. Right now, the traffic is much less than that based off of actual counts that they have done on the road itself. But we also looked at this with this new planned subdivision and the existing lot parcels that are there and can calculated up how much, calculated ADT traffic we could have with this additional new lots, and that comes out to about 1,100. And that includes some of the other developments that are also in process as well, some of the nearby Hay Creek, other Hay Creek developments that are also there. So that was taken into account. Road impact fees will apply to the development itself. Any questions on transportation?
Are there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your description of what is in that area there. Knowing that there are several comments from residents and so forth with regard to fire safety and so forth. The Hay Creek Road, just kind of interested in some comments on that, kind of speaking a little bit more broadly. So obviously Hay Creek Road has an egress going to the east, but what if there was a fire that was to the east? So does Hay Creek have, in the western approaches, a second way to get out? So in other words, does Hay Creek have 2 ways to get in and out?
No, it does not, Commissioner. It has basically it terminates as it goes to the west, further down into the canyon area, into the large parcels that are to the west itself. There's not another public road that provides access to the west itself.
Okay, thank you. And then with regard to the road itself that is in this area, you talked about meeting the engineering criteria for the road and for the cul-de-sac. Does that criteria include having a capacity in the cul-de-sac to be large enough for fire vehicles and so forth to do a turnaround there?
It does, yes.
Okay. And then I heard this comment with regard to a buffer with the Air Force Academy, and I don't know if we have that data available to us here, but I would be interested in knowing, what does that mean? What is the Air Force Academy buffer? Do they have some kind of easement rights with the properties adjoining the academy about housing development limits or anything like that? I don't know what buffer means.
Sure. Yeah, I'll let planning answer that question, Commissioner.
Okay.
So it is within that buffer area, but there are no easements for the Air Force Academy. Is that what you were asking about?
So yes. So what does buffer mean?
It's an excellent question.
And if you don't have a great understanding of that, maybe you do have a little bit here. Okay.
I'm going to pull up what the United States Air Force Academy sent the county on this
Okay.
project, and hopefully maybe that's a little bit more helpful. So the United States Air Force Academy provided El Paso County with a letter regarding this project, specifically as it relates to Jacks Valley, which is their training facility and operations. I believe there's a firing range there and a few more other operations that happen that I would hate to misspeak on at this point. But the United States Air Force Academy did request that as part of this development, the developer include a plat note and covenants to provide full disclosure of those nearby training operations. That way, any future or current landowners understand what they are purchasing when they purchase that property and how the United States Air Force Academy may impact them moving forward.
Okay, thank you. So that might be kind of what the definition of the buffer is. So the Air Force Academy has an interest in making sure landowners, when they buy and sell, have some kind of notification, or it be located on the plat or something, that the Air Force Academy is there. And that's going to mean training and noise and so forth. Okay, great. And then I know that this is kind of a question out of the blue, and you know, if you don't have an answer right now, you might be able to answer it later. But I know on the south side of the Air Force Academy, there are residents that abut up against the Air Force Academy property as well. And there is one place there where there is not a well-developed road requiring four-wheel drive vehicles, but it is potentially a second egress for some residents on the south side of the academy under some kind of condition, fire condition or whatever. That road could be used, and it would mean going into the Air Force Academy without meeting any of the entrance criteria like you would have at the normal gate, but only would be put to use for an emergency situation. And that's the best I can describe it right now. I don't know some of the nuances or what some of the agreements are with regard to that, but I would be interested in knowing if there's been any conversation about something similar here on the north side.
From talks with the United States Air Force Academy, it is my understanding that the residents to the north may not access the roads on the United States Air Force Academy in the event of an emergency. And I believe that is due to Jacks Valley and those operations that take place there.
Okay, so that is not something that's available at this time?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
All right, to continue on with drainage, the parcels for the developments are for the lots that will have homes on them is not going to be located in a floodplain. There's a portion of the development, just a very small portion to the basically that's to the northeast that does lie within that floodplain along Hay Creek. That will not have any homes in it. That's going to be designated as a track area for the detention pond for the development that will be maintained by the HOA, so that has minimal impact to the development itself. The rest of the area for the development lies outside the floodplain. The property is located within the Beaver Creek Drainage Basin and the Air Force Academy Drainage Basin. The Beaver Creek Drainage Basin fees will be paid at the time of plat recordation, and then there's no bridge fees for Beaver Creek and no drainage or bridge fees for the Air Force Academy. A master drainage development plan and drainage report has been submitted for the application. With the application, no drainage improvements, public and drainage improvements are proposed. And I mentioned the private detention pond for the development that will be maintained by the HOA. Barring your questions, that's all I have for drainage.
Are there any questions regarding drainage? Thank you.
I think I went too far. Before I ask the applicant to come up, I just want to make a quick statement real fast. On your staff report, there was an error with the owner. So the owner is View Homes. They did sign the application moving forward with this project. So I just wanted to clarify that before we move forward. At this time, I would like to invite Jason Allwine with Matrix Design up to go over the applicant's presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jason Allwine, Matrix Design Group, representing View Homes. Some of what I have is repeat, so I apologize in advance, but I do want to go through some of the criteria and master plan conformance that we feel we are meeting. Again, in reference, the site is located in red, southwest of Forest Lakes Drive and Baptist Road Highway, in I-25. We're about 0.9 miles, just under a mile southwest of the Forest Lakes Hay Creek intersection. So about 0.9 miles, just about a mile into our access into the site. As we look at the final plat approval criteria as part of this application, we do feel we meet all of the final plat criteria, starting with a conformance with the goals, objectives, and the policy of the master plan. As mentioned, we are located within the large lot residential and the military buffer place type, the primary land use being 2.5 acre lots or larger, and we comply with that. The Hay Creek project supports the rural character of this place type by providing that unique, desirable neighborhood within the context of the rolling hills of the Front Range, and we are staying compatible with similar land uses near that military base. The rolling topography and the large stands of existing trees do help provide that additional buffer between existing residents and the military Air Force Academy to the south. We are in substantial conformance with the approved preliminary plan that was approved back in late 2023, and we are meeting all the applicable sections of Chapter 6 and 8 of this code. 2 deviations and 2 waivers were approved as part of the preliminary plan back in late 2023. In reference to your El Paso County Master Plan, is there desirability or demand within the community for this use? Typically, we stand up here and want small lots, but in this case, we're looking for large lots that meet the existing area with 5, 10, 20, 15 acre lots in the area, 4 acre lots. So there is a demand for that still in this area. The large lot, it preserves the character of the rural living while remaining aware of the environmentally sensitive areas such as slope, existing stands of vegetation, a mouse habitat, and riparian areas. Does the market support this kind of need? Yes, there's still a demand for these large lots in this area of El Paso County and near Monument. And would the use be providing necessary housing or goods and services? It provides that housing for this, again, demand for these large lots is adjacent to main infrastructure with Forest Lakes, Baptist Road, and I-25. It is near employment centers, it is near shopping centers, and we support the goal HC2 of preserving the character of the rural and environmental areas, again, by creating no-build tracts, no-build zones, preserving existing wetlands, riparian corridors, and the Preble's mouse habitat. With respect to the El Paso County Water Master Plan, all proposed lots will be on well and septic. We did a court decree that was recorded for our water rights June 29th of 2023, and subsequently as part of our final plat process, we did receive in February of 2024 the state engineer's opinion of water sufficiency, deeming that we have water supply adequate and can be provided without causing injury to decreed water rights. Meeting the goal 4.2 and 6.1.2, water conservation is achieved through the use of the wells for each lot, and we have no common landscape or irrigated areas as part of this development. And then finally, with terms to meeting the last final plat criteria, we do have acquired that water sufficiency in terms of quantity, quality, and dependability for this project. As mentioned, there were 2 deviations and 2 waivers that were approved previously as part of the prelim plan. Deviation number 1 is the cul-de-sac length greater than 1,600 feet with no midway turnaround. This is our access point off Hay Creek Road. As mentioned, it goes an easement through private property, comes into our property, dead end with that cul-de-sac built to the fire department standards. It's about just over a mile long, so deviation for that. Deviation number 2 was to have a centerline radius less than 300 feet. This occurs in a couple locations. At the revised intersection that Mr. Schoenheit described, where we had to kind of redesign this to help with the angle and sight lines. And then some of the existing curves were a little less than 300 feet, so we asked for a deviation on that criteria. Additionally, with the 2 waivers, waiver number 1 is the minimum 2 points of access as it relates to the cul-de-sac length. Because we are greater than 1,600 feet, we did ask for a waiver, and that was supported by the fire department to only have 1 point of access due to the length of our cul-de-sac. And then additionally, we are a private gated road instead of a public roadway. That was a waiver that we worked through with the county staff as part of the prelim plan. And those waivers and deviations carried over as part of the final plat application. Traffic impacts, I know this was talked about a little bit, but just kind of a recap. We did supply, as part of the preliminary plan process, a traffic memorandum, and it was approved by the engineering department in August 2023. We did some counts about a year ago. At that time, there were 367 daily trips west of our intersection, or west of our proposed access point. And as mentioned, we're adding additional 218 total trips per day that is coming and going. It was found that no improvements to Hay Creek Road were required as part of this project. We do have traffic impact fees that will be paid per lot at building permit and final plat. And this project has a negligible impact to the existing Hay Creek Road, so no deviation was requested or required for Hay Creek Road proper, or improvements to Hay Creek Road. As part of the prelim plan and final plat, we did submit a fire protection report. The criteria for the prelim plan and final plat is the same for both applications. Working with the fire department, we are providing a minimum 33,000 gallon cistern at the far end of the subdivision in the cul-de-sac. That's actually a 35,000 gallon that's being installed or proposed to be installed, but it has to be no smaller than 33,000 gallons. As part of that process, we also submitted a wildfire hazard and mitigation report, and some of the highlights from that report are grasses should and could be mowed regularly to reduce overall height of the grass. In areas, the pine forest and oak understory should be cut and removed. And then lastly, a recommendation was to have a 30-foot kind of clear zone of the structure's foundation from junipers and low-growing conifers. In addition, as part of a condition of approval, we have to follow those guidelines while the houses shall be completed before or during dwelling construction to meet that wildfire hazard and mitigation criteria outlined in that report. This was a letter provided by the fire district, Monument Fire District, as part of the prelim plan process. I'd like to kind of point out bullet points 1, 3, and 4, that they support and approve the private and gated access road. The road's about 1 mile long, required to have a 100-foot cul-de-sac at the end, which we do. They did not require a second point of access or a mid-block turnaround. They mentioned they could use the driveways to turn around if necessary. And then at the end of that cul-de-sac, install a minimum 33,000 gallon cistern within the community tract with that submersible pump and hydrant to help with fire suppression. So that is part of the construction documents submitted with the final plat. And additionally, some fire mitigations are already being completed. In summer of 2023, there was a plus or minus an acre and a half of mistletoe. This was in the southeast portion of the project. We did some mitigation to help with that dwarf mistletoe infestation. And then recently, in the spring of 2024, there was about another plus or minus 2 acres of scrub oak mitigated in the far western portion of the site. So we're already beginning to do some of that fire mitigation outlined in those documents. Here is the site plan. We are zoned RR5, minimum 5 acre lots. The site is approximately 215 acres with 20 large lots proposed. Lot sizes anywhere from 5.5 acres up to a little over 17 acres. The majority, or all of the 5 acre lots are located on the northern part of the project. The southern portion of the project contains all the biggest lots. Our average lot size is 9.6 acres with 11 lots bigger than 10 acres. This southern portion is what borders the Air Force Academy and their training ground, so the larger lots are there to help provide that additional buffer. There's quite a bit of vegetation and topography here, which you'll see in some future slides to help, again, buffer those training grounds and provide that kind of natural separation. Here, just some aerial context. The Jacks Valley Training Ground to the south, you can see quite a bit of existing vegetation along the southern portion of our property as this ridge goes up. The valley itself is mostly native grasses. With respect to the Air Force Academy, we did meet with them several times, once on site, and as mentioned, as part of the process, they did ask and we did comply with an avigation easement that was recorded back in November of 2023. Those disclosure notes have been placed on the final plat, so not only do we have the recorded avigation easement, but we do have disclosure notes on the final plat, and this is a snip of that recorded language that was recorded as part of that document, identifying flight, training, dust, vibration, illumination, et cetera, that occurs as part of the training with the Air Force Academy. So when somebody goes to buy a lot, title report, this will pull up as part of those disclosure statements for future buyers, whether it's new buyer or subsequent buyers down the road.
And as we look at the projects in context, so to the left is our Hay Creek Valley development. There's an existing ridge that separates our property line is about right at the top of that ridge. And then to the plan view to the right or south is the Jacks Valley Training Ground. So you can see we do already kind of a natural buffer that separates us between those training grounds and our proposed development. And looking a little further closer, this is a cross-section cut between the training grounds and our property. So this is this ridge that forms right here, and we do sit in that valley with the existing vegetation. So there's already a natural buffer, and with these larger lots occurring on this slope, kind of pushes that building pad closer interior to the apartment and less on the uphill side to further provide that buffer between the training grounds of this development and the Air Force Academy. Here's just some pictures of the development. The top two are looking kind of in a southwesterly direction. As you enter development, again, looking south and west. The lower left is looking back towards the east. As you can see, kind of going up, that's the natural vegetation in that ridge. And then the bottom right is from Hay Creek Road into our entrance of the subdivision. These trees, some of these trees will be removed and mitigated as part of that in-tree revision that the staff worked with us to ask us to do to help with the sight lines, to help with that intersection, because it's quite skewed right now, so they asked us to bring that to more of a 90 to help with the visibility, so we were able to accomplish that. But some of these trees will be removed to help with those sight lines. And then as a reminder, going back to prelim plan, it was approved at Planning Commission. I know recently denied, but back in September 2023 with a 9-0 vote. Some of the concerns at that time are also traffic, wildfire risk, wildlife. And then subsequently, Board of County Commissioners was approved in October, 5-0. Again, similar concerns, traffic, wildfire risk, and wildlife. With that, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions for the applicant at this time? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll ask staff if that concludes the presentation portion for both staff and the applicant.
That concludes staff's presentation unless there's any questions for me at this time.
Do we have any questions at this time? Okay. Hearing none, as I indicated a bit ago, before we move into the next section where we will take public comment for those in support and in opposition of this item, we will take a brief recess. I'm going to just remind those of you here that this is a quasi-judicial item, and so anything that is relevant to this particular item has to be stated on the record, and the commissioners will consider everything all at once. Thank you. With that, we're in recess. Good morning and welcome back to the Thursday, May 9th Board of County Commissioners Land Use Meeting. We are currently in the midst of item number 8, and we had just completed the staff and applicant presentations. And at this point, we will move on to public comment. We will begin with those who are here in support of this application. Is there anyone here in support of this application who would like to speak today? Okay, any online? Okay, excellent. We will move on to the, anyone here to speak today in opposition of this application? I would ask as you come forward to please introduce yourself, and you will have 3 minutes. And a reminder again that you are welcome to combine time of anyone present here in the room if you would like. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And we will combine time just for efficiency versus making transitions for 3 minutes. Is that okay? Okay. Hi, my name's Dr. Jeff Parr, retired Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force. I'm a member of the Hay Creek community. And to begin with, we assume that you're aware and have read the public statement we provided in the April 18th Planning Commission hearing. And in that document, we specifically identified that the applicant does not have a waiver for the LDC section 8.44D Delta, the dead-end road standards, which is 2 egresses for greater than 25 houses on a dead-end cul-de-sac. And that was stated by the developer in his previous briefing. During the Planning Commission hearing, when they were confronted with this revelation, there was some confusion. And I don't want to bore the commission. So if you're familiar with that discussion, I don't want to, I'll move on. But if it would be helpful to recount the discussion of the Planning Commission briefly about that discussion, I can read that. And you have in your notes, but I think it's important to highlight what that discussion was.
Sir, you can use your allotted time as you wish.
Okay.
We do have the Planning Commission meetings minutes.
And if you could just scan that, I will not go through that. I don't want to be adversarial at all. I just want to be direct and make sure that the facts are straight. Okay. Okay, so I just, again, want to be clear. In that discussion, there was no mention of a waiver for the LDC 8.44 dead-end road standards in either the preliminary plan hearings or of the supporting documentation. And conversely, the applicant did identify an erroneous source reference for a private road waiver request during both preliminary plan hearings. That source reference was never challenged. The planned road for this development is a cul-de-sac that greatly exceeds the ECM maximum length criteria of 1,600 feet. It's more than a mile long, nearly 3.5 times the established safety limit. Okay. It's important to note that the fire department only provides a recommendation and uses the internal fire code to assess the proposed property's fire safety provisions. But per IFC Appendix D, special approval is required for any cul-de-sac over 750 feet Furthermore, they do not evaluate against the local LDC and ECM requirements. As such, Hay Creek Dead End Road mandate was not considered in their recommendation, but per Board of County Commissioner Resolution 2164 must be factored in before this board can approve such a waiver. Okay, exacerbating the risk level are two safety-related deviation approvals. One for the cul-de-sac length being greater than 1,600 feet with no midway turnaround, and two for not adhering to the minimum centerline radius 300 feet. Additionally, per LDC 844 Delta Point 3, maximum length of a dead-end road, the maximum length is governed by the ECM and may be further limited in those areas subject to wildfire hazard in accordance with this code. The proposed risk mitigation efforts by the applicant certainly helps alleviate some of the safety concerns. However, this cul-de-sac without a second access, which is Hay Creek development, where there are almost 80 homes currently, over the 25 home requirement for 2 access points, is a far greater number of warning signs and excessive violations that are being overlooked that far outweigh any imprudent waiver approval. Finally, per LDC 8.44E2, private roads require waiver. In granting a waiver to allow private roads, the Board of County Commissions shall make written findings supporting the use of private roads. Where are the substantiating decision findings other than the final votes?
Please introduce yourself for the record. And you can begin.
My name is Lorna Bennett, and I'm a resident that lives up the valley from this proposed development. And I will take the liberty to read some of the comments that one of my neighbors has written regarding this proposal. With respect to the process, we were admonished by the Planning Commissioner Carlson in a statement urging us to pay attention to the notifications that come out, because the time to really press the problem was in the preliminary plat time frame. For the record, during the inception of this development effort in 2022, notifications were isolated to only the properties touching the development. In subsequent notifications, the distribution was expanded to properties within 500 feet of that development. In an area zoned RR5, that expansion has next to zero effect on increasing the notification distribution. Nobody within the upper section of the valley, which is where I live, which constitutes the brunt of the residences, received any notifications. When we tried to point this out, Commissioner Carlson promptly shut us down. And for the record, we did have a member of our neighborhood, she is not able to be here today, Mrs. Kaylee Drew spoke in opposition at the Planning Commission preliminary meeting. Ms. Drew voiced her concerns over several issues: lack of notifications, water, traffic, wildlife, and most importantly, the wildfire evacuation problem. She specifically asked for a postponement of consent so we can have better information communicated to everyone else, like me, who lives out there. After her comments, the applicant came up and addressed all of her concerns except the wildfire evacuation issue. There ensued a very short discussion between commission members on the notification and water topics, zero discussion on the wildfire topic, and after non-acknowledgement of Ms. Drew's main concern, promptly moved on to the never unexpected unanimous decision of approval. As for the BOCC preliminary plan hearing, it was acknowledged that there were public comments in opposition during the planning hearing. However, they only pointed out 2 of Mrs. Drew's concerns, wildlife and traffic, of which there was no further question. There was no mention of the wildfire evacuation issues she raised. Commissioner Vanderwerf spent the better part of the hearing questioning a discrepancy over the conflicting number of conditions, notations, and requirements within the project file, and then later realized he was looking at the wrong file. The end of the hearing focused primarily on the board trying to figure out if there were or were not any deviations or waivers, and this after the applicant had just discussed them. Once it was finally determined that there were deviations and waivers, and I do have the approval of continuing, I assume. And as usual, after the ceremonial formalities, the board quickly moved to motion and unanimously approved it. If you walk into a hearing and aren't already intimately familiar with the deviations and waivers, you're not doing your job. These are the most critical elements of any application and demand increased scrutiny and solid justification for approval. Simply counting them and moving on is not what we expect from our elected officials. Fortunately, amidst all this confusion and misinformation, 5 of the planning commissioners were able to separate the wheat from the chaff and acknowledge the conflicting issue and dire consequences faced by the current occupants of Hay Creek Valley. Furthermore, even the 3 planning commissioners that voted in support of the development, they acknowledged that there is a serious safety problem presented by additional development. Conversely, in the face of so much confusion and doubt about such a critical waiver safety issue, Planning Commissioner Carlson, in his closing vote justification statement, said simply, "The applicant did get a waiver for that issue, and that's why I voted yes." The applicant clearly stated, "I don't recall any direct conversations with the evacuation concerns coming up." We find it hard to believe that the fate of our safety and welfare could be adjudicated on such a whimsical, casual, and thoughtless decision. Furthermore, we also question the judgment of the other 2 planning commissioners, Jack and Schutzpeltz, for simply overlooking such a blindingly open-ended safety-related question. These are glaring examples of precisely why the public has a waning trust in the decisions of these administrative and legislative bodies. On the other hand, after receiving our statement, Planning Commissioners Whitney, Fuller, and Trowbridge dug deep and posed the critical, invasive, and withering questions in an effort to find the truth, and in finding little, voted against the applicant. They are clearly the benchmark for which all commissioners should strive, and for that we are grateful. All said, we reject the assertion that this process took a holistic approach that included the off-site impacts to the entirety of the valley. None of the existing approvals were rendered with any acknowledgement or considerations for the LDC 8.4.4D. And as was also stated, we too believe that it is not the applicant's responsibility to fix that issue for the rest of the valley. That responsibility is yours today. The issue before you pretty much boils down to a single topic decision. If you vote to approve this application, know that you will be effectively waiving the LDC dead-end road mandate, thereby nullifying the intent and purpose of the LDC, and further jeopardizing the safety, welfare, and lives of the current occupants of this valley, as well as the future occupants of the development. Before you render that decision, please consider that, as mentioned previously, this development will put us 400% over the mandated maximum limit. Approving this development will revoke your ability to say no to the inescapable next-in-line developer, as one is already in the queue. We do not plan to sit idly by as you wave through developer after developer, endanger our lives, and turn this valley into the nightmare that is now Woodman Valley. What you need to ask yourself is, how many more lives are you personally willing to risk? The LDC has codified the acceptable limit as 25 lots. Is 400% over the codified limit too many? Is unrestricted development the solution? We, of course, implore you to do as your staff has suggested and don't repeat the mistakes of the past. This issue can no longer be ignored. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And as a reminder, if you have donated time, let us know so we can set the timer in the appropriate 3-minute increment. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in opposition of this issue? And ma'am, are you speaking for your 3 minutes plus some others?
For my own 3 minutes.
Okay,
Yeah, I won't
thank
even
you.
be 3 minutes.
Please
my name
introduce
is
yourself.
Kelly Parr, and I just wanted to speak on the issue of fairness. And Vice Chair, I just appreciate when you started this meeting, you prayed about fairness and you spoke to the previous case about being fair. And I just appreciate that because again, I don't think it is fair that we have a regulation in place to protect our residents, which is us, that there would not be more than 25 homes on a dead end. And for another development to come in, and then there's a development, there's someone here who wants to do another development in our area as well. And it just, like she said, we're going way and way and way over 25 houses on a dead end lot. And that just, we residents have faith in our system that you will make fair decisions for us. So for people to come in, throw waivers at existing things that endanger our safety, to me is not a fair thing. And so the development coming in, they keep speaking of there's 6 homes, but really there's 1 home in that area now, and they want to build 19 more. West of that, like they showed a picture, you've got I-25, then you've got Hay Creek, and then west of that you saw a mountain in the picture. That's where the majority of us live. I would say 60 or 70 homes are to the west of that development. So if there's a fire lower in the valley, the more cars and the more congestion that is in there, the more dangerous it is for us. So with this development, other developments coming, it just endangers our health more and more and more. And I don't understand how you can just throw waivers at things that go against the law that defend people's safety. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Please introduce yourself and indicate if you're speaking for yourself or anyone else. Thank you.
My name is Deborah Cloutier, and I'm just speaking for myself. I live on Hay Creek Road. Several years ago, we had a fire that was approximately 1/2 mile west of us on the mountainside. It required hotshot firefighters to come in because of the rough terrain and the vegetation. If you look at the vegetation on where most of us live, there's tons of scrub oak, brush, deadfall. There has been no mitigation ever up in that part of the valley. If we had winds like we've had the last several days with that fire, it would have wiped out our valley. So the question is, if we have another fire, it's not if we have another fire, it's when we will have another fire. It's difficult to evacuate on a narrow 2-lane road that cannot be widened with this many people. And like Kelly said, there's another development in the works. We have livestock. I have 3 horses. There's other people that have livestock to try to evacuate out of there on a narrow 2-lane road. So my question is, how many casualties are you willing to accept? 5, 10? 1 is too many. Our safety is very much at risk here, and I would like you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Please introduce yourself and let us know how to set that timer if you're speaking for anyone else.
Good morning, Bill Wysong. Board of Commissioners, thank you for allowing us this opportunity. I have 2 kind of key areas to discuss. Again, following up on Kelly's comment, Commissioner Geithner, fairness is very critical. You also mentioned a comment as it relates to trying to get the realtors to understand what's going on with plat comments, et cetera, et cetera. As president of Mountain Shadows Community Association, it is next to impossible to get people to read the covenants, restrictions, plats, et cetera, during the time of closing. So it doesn't happen. And now you've got all these issues that are happening, which now have a direct impact on one of the great military installations that we have in Colorado Springs. That's the Air Force Academy. And as Commissioner Vandenwerth had mentioned about the REPI, or RIPI, it is so important that we do protect our military installations. If this development happens, it could have a huge impact on our readiness of our military. That firing range is used at all hours of the night and day. And the last thing we want to do is have someone complaining about the noise. So I also respectfully ask that you deny this application. Couple of other points, and maybe the county attorney needs to weigh in on this. 8.4.4 D2, more than 25 lots on a dead-end road where more than 25 lots will front the access road. A second means of access shall. Shall is a very important, weighty word in the legal environment. It means if you don't, it doesn't get done. Then I'd like to also talk a little bit about this 35,000-gallon cistern. Anyone know how long it will take to empty that cistern? Depending on the size of the fire truck, the smallest fire truck, 23 minutes. A forest fire, wildfire, 23 minutes of water, that doesn't cut it. I survived Waldo Canyon fire. I know what those kinds of issues are. And as president of Westside Watch, we do this quite a bit as far as accessing and talking. And I'd just like to close. This is a great document, and I really appreciate this. The citizens are at the top of the list. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please introduce yourself, and the 3 minutes will begin unless you tell us otherwise that you're speaking for someone else.
Good morning. My name's Tony Warnock. I think I'm the last of our team here. So I'm going to speak for everyone. I've got 45 minutes of comments. No, I don't.
Thanks for respecting that.
Appreciate your time this morning. I know this is a tough issue, listening to what you guys have to navigate. As I was listening to the discussion regarding the Apex homes, I think that we all, as community members in this valley, recognize that there's some inherent risks in where we live, and that private land ownership is critical, the flexibility to be able to do these things. I think as a member of this community, what I want to speak to on behalf of my neighbors is that for us, this isn't just simply a not in my backyard issue. I know that I know that it's easy to at times hear that. For me, I was involved with the Hayman Fire back in 2002. We had to evacuate our ranch. And I've experienced what it's like to do a large-scale evacuation on a one-lane or on a two-lane road with no egress and one ingress into it. I've been down this road. The concerns are legitimate. And I think that as I listen to the representatives for View Homes, and as I listen to the engineering, it makes total sense if you look at this at a very granular level. If we take a microscope and just look at this one piece of development, actually everything that's been said, even the waivers, start to make sense. But as you expand this out and take a very holistic approach to the greater area that we're dealing with at the end of Hay Creek Road, and then when you factor in the Forest Lakes development, the primary, there is an egress and ingress on that development, but the primary egress is the bridge over the railroad tracks that on Baptist Road where Hay Creek empties out. And so when you think of 1,100 car average daily use and being able to handle that, I think that engineering-wise, if you're looking at the road and what it's capable of, that makes absolute sense. When you take it into the broader picture of what could possibly happen in an emergent situation, you quickly recognize that if you're on a large cul-de-sac and the culmination of vehicles and emergency vehicles coming in and out of that, it's not sustainable. And I want to say that I think that the developers on this specific project have worked very hard to do what the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners has asked regarding the specificity of that valley where they're wanting to build, as far as asking for the waivers that they needed, the continuity of the general feel of the valley in a semi-rural area. I don't feel like there's been enough conversation recognizing what it does to the terminal end of the valley. I'm one of the 3 or 4 landowners that's on the farthest terminal end. I intersect the corner on the west side that is bounded on the south side by the Air Force Academy. And we have horses, and I've got 5 kids, and getting all of them out feels like it's an impossible situation on a regular Tuesday morning. And so when I'm looking at an emergency situation, when I'm looking at a problem, it does feel like the gravity of this becomes exponential as we're engaging with it. And so while I don't want to come across as someone that doesn't understand both sides of this issue, I do feel as though the overbearing weight of this does fall into a safety consideration, that we're not dealing with a fountain or a Eastern Plains development that has its own issues. We're dealing with a western boundary set of properties that runs into the Forest Service that also has geography that closes it with no egress in the property. Being so far over the current 25 lot plat in the LDC, I would argue that waving away primary elements of the LDC really pulls the teeth out of the code. And there's a degree in which where I understand that you can make exceptions and you can navigate the individual decisions as they come up, but we're quite a ways over that right now. And from our standpoint as community members, obviously the fire concern continues to be one that rises up in our community as to how we navigate that as it stands right now. And so to add density, to add numbers to it, I'm having a hard time seeing the real logic to it, because it's not solving a significant housing crisis issue with large lot, high income, high end homes. That we're not talking about apartments. We're not talking about a 950 home development. We're talking about very exclusive, very small allotments. But for us, any increase in that density becomes greater than what we believe is the best for our community as far as the long-term sustainability and viability regarding emergent situations. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak on this item? Okay. With that, I will ask the applicant. Oh, we do have someone online. Can I clarify whether that is they are in opposition to this application? Okay, excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Dana Dugan. I'm one of the founders of Westside Watch. And a 19-year resident of Colorado Springs, and I would like to back up a little bit and go through a quick history of the 25, that number, which, by the way, I was delighted to see that you guys have an egress limit in your code. The city doesn't, and that is really wonderful, and I hope during the retool of the county code, you keep it in there. This number, people might dismiss it as, small or meaningless. It actually it goes way back to the 1960s and 70s when the National Fire Protection Association started requiring 2 access points for neighborhood developments of a certain size. And then in the 1980s, they put actual numbers on it, and that was driven by safety and emergency response times and traffic management. And then in the 2000s, the WUI and fire-prone areas became much more concerning, and they began enforcing these limits much more rigidly. And it all comes from science, which I absolutely love. And I know Commissioner Vanderwerf has heard me talk about this. It was actually studies, simulations, and historical data that was used to create these numbers of 25 to 30, depending on which source you're using. And the studies show that the roads become inadequate for evacuating more than 25 to 30 homes due to bottleneck effects. So this area is already 3.2x more dangerous than it should be. The models using simulation evacuation times again predicted the time required for the areas to be safely evacuated. And in wildfire-prone regions of California, it showed that beyond 25 homes, a single road would become a bottleneck during peak evacuation period. And we also know that human behavior in these chaotic conditions just exacerbates that. So, and just lastly, I know a lot of people don't like California and Colorado Springs, but after the Paradise Fire, they have mandated statewide that new developments have 2 egresses, and this is why. So I would strongly encourage you to enforce your code and understand that these numbers don't come out of thin air. They're based on science. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Please come on down and introduce yourself. And your 3 minutes will begin.
My name's Roger Steele. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but I'm an engineer. I also live in the Hay Creek subdivision. I've been there for 37 years. And being an engineer and just hearing what she said, I was looking for where's the science behind the number of 25? Where's the simulations, et cetera? And after hearing her, the homework's been done. And they came up with, hey, here's the criteria. 25 is it. And I've heard today you mentioned the word criteria many, many times. So the criteria is 25. You're 300% of that right now. Why are we thinking about exasperating the problem? We should be taking corrective action. And if you want to visualize, I was listening to all this and I was visualizing, just last week we had 80-mile-per-hour winds come through our area. I thought my windows were going to be blown out. And I just think, today I'm just thinking about the cistern is one thing I was hearing. But listening is, if there was a fire, it'd be 3 times the number of people coming down. It'd be the horses coming down, because open the corral, you're on your own. It's like a trough going down. It's a road, it's got fences on both sides. It's 2.5 miles to where you exit. It's just a real narrow trough. You'll have cars, you'll have everybody, it'll be in absolute chaos, and 3 times the chaos, but even more than that, because I don't believe the chaos will be linear with respect to 3, but more exponential. And not only the corrals will be open, the horses will become, we got yaks up there. They'll go through the corral. They'll be coming down like you must be in Spain with running of the bulls. And there's emus. And on top of that, all the national forest deer are going to come off the mountains and go down through this 2.5-mile trough. In the meantime, emergency vehicles are going to be trying to come up. It's going to be a mess. And regarding the cistern, if a fire truck comes down that's empty, goes to the cistern, goes up and turns around, hooks up the hoses, comes back down, wants to make a left-hand turn to go back up, the game's over. The 80-mile-an-hour winds have already wiped out the area back there. So, you know, I mean, the truck might as well just head home. The game's over, and I'm sorry, but I think the probability of sad results is very prevalent. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Last call. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? And no more online. Okay, with that, would the applicant like to answer any questions and begin the rebuttal at this point?
A lot of different notes. I'll try to answer or address all the concerns best I can. Starting with, we'll start with fire. You know, we met with the fire department. We had conversations with them. It was their request of a cistern, and remind the cistern helps, you know, suppression on our property. It's not there to supply fire suppression or water for the entire valley. You know, I don't know how many of the projects existing or proposed have a cistern further, you know, west or uphill of us. But we're complying with the fire department's request in providing a cistern for water for that fire suppression within our project. Talking to the fire department, I think the nearest hydrant is about a mile from our intersection at Forest Lakes and Baptist, where it transitions into Hay Creek. So it is relatively close. Yeah, there, you know, minutes do matter, and having that 33,000-gallon cistern in our property does help with some, you know, knock that down, you know, to you know, give some additional time to help you know, residents evacuate our community. With respects to the you know, the traffic in the section 8.4, if we can go here, that doesn't apply to us. We weren't asked to address Hay Creek Road when it comes to a dead end or 25 units. Our subdivision has 20 lots on a dead end road, yes. And that number 3, the dead end road is governed by ECM, the ECM. We reference ECM in our waivers that were reviewed and approved at the prelim plat stage, which is when those conversations needed to happen, and they did happen. We had those waivers, we had those deviations in conjunction not only with staff, engineering, and the fire department. So, you know, to say or to imply that staff looks at this at a micro level, I don't think is true, because it is a macro level. When we look at traffic concerns, traffic impacts, fire impacts, the fire department, you know, gave a letter of support with our proposal. One long road, no mid-block turnaround, and a fire cistern with a private gated access. Our traffic impact memorandum, you know, we have 218 total trips per day. That's 109 out, 109 in, again, over a 24-hour period. Our peak traffic, I believe, is about 16 trips AM, PM, you know, when that kind of rush hour hits. There were no requirements to improve Hay Creek Road. There were no recommendations or requirements to provide a waiver for Hay Creek proper, as our access and our frontage are on a private road that does tee into Hay Creek, you know, downstream of many of the residents and their concerns. With respect to the Air Force Academy, again, we met with them numerous times, one on site. We have an navigation easement in place. A comment that, you know, folks don't read those disclosures, understand, but I can't help that, much like I can't help if a realtor says, well, it's proposed to be open space and really it's a commercial development, or it's proposed to be open space and it's a, you know, an apartment complex. We met with them, we heard their concerns. That's why we have those disclosure notes. That's why we have those large 17-acre lots, you know, 15-acre lots on our southern boundary. You know, we have a fairly substantial, you saw the image, ridge and hill and some vegetation to help mitigate those concerns. You know, for somebody to say that I live there and I'm okay with noise, and when they sell their house, is the next person can be okay with those noise? We have those disclosures, we have those documents that you get a packet, and it's, it's up to the homeowner, to do their due diligence, but we're providing the requirements and those disclosures asked by El Paso County and asked by the Air Force Academy. I think with it comes to, the plan as a general, again, a lot of these things were discussed and reviewed, I think, in detail at the time of preliminary plan. We got no letters of opposition as part of the process, both prelim plan or final plat. Yes, neighbors did show up at the hearings. We felt we addressed those concerns, and I think that's reflected in the approvals of the prelim plan. And we're here today, essentially with a final plat that's in complete conformance to that prelim plan, as well as that sufficiency of water finding, which is a big reason we're here today, because we had that after the prelim plan was through the process. Any further questions?
Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Williams.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I do believe the owner would like to speak.
Good morning. Joe Stifter. I'm with View Homes. I just wanted to clarify one thing. The section of code that's being referred to over and over and over, I believe 8.4.4D, it's very specific in that it says no more than 25 units shall front and take access to a dead-end road. And what's being continually referenced here is Hay Creek Road. We have 20 homes that front and take access to, Snow Mountain Heights, I believe is the name of the road. None of those homes front Hay Creek Road. So speaking literally to the code, we meet that code. It's also a subdivision code. It's not, so it applies to our subdivision. We have one road in our subdivision. We have 20 units that front and take access. All 20 of our units take access to Hay Creek Road. None of them front Hay Creek Road. So there's a distinguishment there. And then when we talk about being over the requirement by 300% or what have you, one, technically we're not, because again, 20 units take access in front. Only 20 units access Hay Creek Road. If you think of Hay Creek Road all the way up to the west.
Actually, can I interrupt you just
Sure.
1 second? Is it possible for us to pull up just one of the visual maps, any one of them, that can help us understand what you're describing? Thank you.
That one?
Is that further back out?
Further back out.
Yeah, if there's a bigger one.
Maybe that one?
Well, that's probably good. So as you can see, I hope, if you can see my cursor, here's Hay Creek Road. Here is Snow Mountain Heights. Is that what we're calling it? Whatever we're going to name this particular road, which is the singular road in our subdivision. So we are proposing 20 homes on this road. All these lots front and take access to this road. Not sure what happened. Here we go. Okay. In an emergency situation, an assumption is, I think, that generally people understand the emergency at relatively the same time. So all of these, as you go back to the west, all these will be coming into, if everybody gets the emergency at the same time, which I think what the gentleman referenced as far as the scientific study is based on. A certain number of units will be hitting Hay Creek Road here at roughly the same time that they'll be hitting here, here, and here. So it's not as if all 84 units, which is, I believe, the current number or the number with our proposed development. That's without. So they're not all accessing the same point at the exact same time. They're accessing different points on Hay Creek Road at the same time. If you consider probably how this was likely modeled, I don't know, I haven't seen it. So we meet the code as it's defined in the Land Development Code and El Paso County's code. And I think even logically you can, if you want to interpret it in a way that it's Hay Creek Road, whether you access or front, which isn't how the code's written, you could argue, and I think realistically so, that everybody's going to access Hay Creek Road at roughly the same time, but at different points along this alignment. So it's not fair to say that 84 homes are all going to hit the same point at the same time. That's all I have. I just wanted to clarify that point.
I'm Tim Bouchard with the applicant as well, with View Homes. I just wanted to touch on a few other points. To reiterate kind of what Jason had said, some of our first meetings was with the fire department, and we knew that was going to be our biggest hurdle on this. And what they asked us to do was provide water in that valley because there isn't water there today. So that's why we have the cistern. The other negotiations we had was giving them a road that was wide enough, which we've done, as well as the turnaround at the end of our cul-de-sac being wide enough. So that has been done. The other thing is that we had the fire mitigation report that was required with our submittal. We've actually started to enact that plan and have mitigated over 3.5 acres of land out there as of today. When it goes into the Air Force, we do have the abrogation easement that was recorded right after the approval of the preliminary plat. It is on the final plat itself. It's also on the preliminary plat, a note. We will have it embedded in our CCNRs, but we also will have it at a point of sale and within our sales contract to that person. So there's going to be several different places where that gets touched. We also have some no-build areas that are too steep, so we do have a buffer from the Air Force Academy to address some of the issues with closeness to the proximity of the academy. But the last thing, reiteration, is with section 0.8.4.4D, staff has never brought that as an issue that we need to address, and even as our last meeting last week with them, they have not stated that we're in nonconformance with that. We have our attorney here, and we have reviewed that with him, the actual verbiage of the code that literally says the maximum number of lots fronting and taking access from a dead-end road is 25. If you look at Hay Creek, I don't believe they're even at 25% when you say fronting and accessing, where people's driveways are actually coming onto that road. Staff might be able to verify that. We agree there's 80 lots that do access that road, but when you're looking at the literal written black and white here words, it's and, not or. So that's just wanted to reiterate that. And thank you for your time and consideration. We're available for any questions you guys may have.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
This is for one of the three gentlemen who've been talking to us. Where is the cistern located?
So the cistern at this point is going to be located right at the end, the most western side of the community, at the end of this cul-de-sac.
Okay, and that cistern is to serve essentially the houses on that road.
It'll serve this community, but if there is a fire further up, the fire department will be accessing it for use.
Okay, thank you.
It'll be a Knox box on our gated entry, providing we do gate it. They'll have access to it. So this is kind of what their request was, and we have accommodated.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions for the applicant at this time? Okay. With that, we will close the formal public hearing portion. Thank you. And do we have any final questions of staff from any of the commissioners?
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, thank you. Excuse me. Well, we have an interesting conversation we're going to have about this, I believe. I do feel at this point I need the staff to provide a legal interpretation of this 844D because we have different points of view with regard to this, and I think it revolves around what space does the application of that land development code apply to? Does it apply to all of Hay Creek Road in its entirety, or does it apply to each of these developments that feed into Hay Creek Road? And I don't know if we need a legal interpretation of that, but that's really coming down to the crux of the issue here, I think.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Megan Harrington, Planning Director. Kylie is going to bring up a slide. We're certainly happy to have the County Attorney weigh in. But according to the Land Development Code, when we look at these applications, the planning department interprets the land development code. We do coordinate with the county attorney's office, but in this case, Kylie's going to bring up a slide to kind of walk you through what occurred with our review.
So as you heard before, the Land Development Code does state in 8.4.4.d where more than 25 lots would front and take access to a dead-end road, a second means of access shall be required. This is the northern boundary of the Hay Creek Valley subdivision, right here. There is a parcel between the northern boundary of their subdivision and Hay Creek Road. Therefore, staff has determined that it does not front Hay Creek Road in section 8.4.4.d, sorry, lots of numbers, for Hay Creek Road would not apply to this subdivision because it does not front Hay Creek Road.
Further, I would add to that the beginning of Chapter 8 talks about the application of these subdivision design standards being specific to the subdivision itself. And so it's difficult for us to say we're going to apply this more globally outside of the subdivision review. And so that's where we've ended with interpretation of the language specific to the 25 lots. We do rely heavily on the fire department when reviewing applications. I don't know where the 25 lots comes from. There was a citizen that mentioned that was based on science or a document. I don't know what that document is. As far as we've been told, that does not exist in the International Fire Code. That aside, our interpretation is still based on just this language pertaining to the subdivision.
I'd be interested in if there's any other questions from any of the commissioners. I do have a bunch of comments with regard to this that I'll make when the right time is right.
I don't have any questions. Does anyone else of staff? Okay. Commissioner Williams?
I think at the same time on staff, they said the opposition stated that a waiver had been previously granted. Was it then granted again in this one?
So there were two waivers previously granted. So my understanding is that those waivers that were granted carry forward through this application, and you do not vote on those waivers as part of this subdivision request because they were previously granted with the preliminary plan. Does that answer your question?
And that was a plan that we've considered before?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do commissioners have any further questions of staff at this time? Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Van der Werf.
Thank you. I would, this is an interesting dilemma, I think. And so on the one hand, we need homes. We do. On the other hand, we've got to worry about fire risk. And we need to do that as well. This has been actually a big issue for me, being the commissioner on the west side. And so one of the things that I thought that's been very important is with regard, and I know that some people have heard me say this, with regard to really needing to model these communities and get a better understanding about what risk we're actually carrying. With regard to the LDC section 844D, I don't know where the 25 number comes from either. I could probably speculate on it in that it, based on some research and so forth, that was some kind of a number. But here's part of the challenge: is it really depends entirely on the environment that you have in that particular area, and the only way to really know the right answer is to model it. And modeling is so sophisticated today using stochastic processes. You can literally model very, very unique environmental conditions, size of road, how many homes, all this kind of stuff. And I would imagine that modeling has not been done in this area. With regard to the already pre-approved waivers, I have no objection to those, but I do think we have something interesting here in 844D. Now, the staff has taken an interpretation of that, and I recognize that interpretation. Here's the challenge that we have is it's not modeled, and without modeling, we don't really know how much risk we're carrying here or not carrying. Without modeling, it does seem to make sense that somehow, some way, and I don't know if this has been attempted or tried or whatever, and it's kind of not specifically germane to this particular development, but on the Hay Creek Road, the larger road, which has a large number of homes, specifically addressing, specifically coming to this point of 25 houses versus not 25 houses or more than that. Again, without modeling, just the code has that. And I don't know what that means, but it feels to me like that needs to either be modeled or somehow, some way, a second means of ingress and egress needs to be created, even if it were to be just for emergency only. By the way, I do appreciate these are not necessarily germane to, I think, what's core here, but I do appreciate some of the other comments that were made. I did ask about, if the Air Force Academy was willing to provide a second means of ingress or egress. For those of you in the audience, you might have seen staff come up and mention to me a couple of things. What I'd like to do is just get that on public record so that everybody knows what that conversation was about. And that was just a little bit more clarification provided to me with regard to their interaction with the Air Force Academy and why they were not interested in providing access to a road up there. Notwithstanding the environmental conditions, it might be a little difficult to get up there because of the ridge and all of that kind of stuff. The other thing is that the Air Force Academy intends on using those roads for firefighting. That was what the staff said to me. So there's value in that. That's a good thing. But it would be useful. And I just know that there is an emergency-only kind of condition for some homes on the south side that I think are there or could be there. I appreciate the fire department's comments. I appreciate the cistern as well, because that will be helpful. And I appreciate the developer doing some land clearing and so forth. And also I appreciate the avigation easement because not relating to fire issues, that is also a topic that frequently comes up with regard to the flying environment that the Air Force Academy does. And I do think it is important to have that avigation easement and to make those notices to prospective land purchasers or home buyers in the area. They just need to know that they're buying or building in proximity to the Air Force Academy and what that means. So I'll come back now to the core thing, and that is the fire safety and the modeling. And this is something that I feel very strongly about. Now, I don't normally talk about this on the dais here, but I'm running for state senate, and it's actually something I want to do. I feel like the state needs to do more modeling, and I feel like that needs to be a proposal for the state to build a modeling office. There are other states that have modeling offices, and they use them to great effect for a lot of different things. One of those is regard to fire risk. Another one is with regard to road infrastructure to make sure that they're efficient. And I know that modeling can really provide some great answers there. Now, having said that, I accept the staff's technical definition that 844D doesn't apply in this case, but that's a concern that I have with regard to whether there be another ingress or egress in this area. So I know that we have a proclamation that we'll be doing as a result of this, and I don't know how many notations and so forth are in there, but if we could get that provided to me, or maybe we could take a quick recess and I can get set for that. That would be advisable unless anybody has comments from the other commissioners with regard to my comments.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes, I pulled up the previous approval regarding this waiver, and when it comes to the waivers, I believe truly that I am at the mercy of the fire department, because they're the ones who grant the waiver, or they're the ones who have to speak to the waivers. This is a letter from Matrix that says a waiver is requested from providing a minimum of 2 separate access routes if the cul-de-sac exceeds the length allowed by the ECM. The nature of the topography of this site does not allow for access from multiple points to the main roadway, Hay Creek Road, to the north. There are no roadways accessible to the south due to the Air Force property, and no roads to the west or east due to large private property surrounding the site. The existing roadway is to be improved by widening, paving, and the addition of a cul-de-sac to accommodate large emergency vehicles. But the key thing I'm reading here is in the follow-up letter provided by the Monument Fire District, which would be Andy Kovacs, the fire chief, dated April 10th, 2023, no second point of access was agreed to by the division chief or fire marshal. I think that meets the waiver request that I would need to consider this. I'm not that happy about a private road, but because we found some problems with private roads after about 20 years of getting them repaved. But that's, it seems to me that it does meet the fire district requirements. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Do you still, Commissioner Vanderwerf, feel that you need a brief recess?
Well, if I could ask council to confirm that there are 10 conditions and 2 notations. I mean, I'm looking at a list here. I just want to make sure I've got the right list.
Commissioner, can I have just a moment?
Any other comments while we are waiting on that? Commissioner Geithner.
I'll go ahead and I was going to wait until a motion had been made, but I will go ahead and make my comments since we're kind of waiting on an answer there. I appreciate all of the community who's come out. As was mentioned, fairness is very important to me. You know, when we approach these issues in a quasi-judicial manner, we are to be impartial. We are to look at the facts and evidence. And it's an important piece to have the community come in and make their statements and give us things to consider, question things from different angles. And that helps us ask better questions and really helps us get to the issues that we are grappling with at this point in time. And I want to, some of the key things that I think came up, I think Commissioner Vanderwerf was very correct in this, is that question about the specific meaning of specific words in our land development code and when it applies and when it doesn't. I also appreciate our staff and believe they are the experts in interpreting our code. So I too take what Megan has said with great weight. In the event, though, that I really believed that there was a discrepancy or a difference of interpretation, I would certainly bring that forward. I don't feel that way at this point, and I'm going to, a certain member or of the public mentioned the word shall and said, this is a very important word when we're talking about legal interpretations, and I agree. The word shall is very important, and so is the word and. And that is the word that we're very much talking about. So I agree that the interpretation of words the chair here to my right will know, my degree is in English. I find words very important, and I pay a lot of attention to them. And I really appreciate that individual bringing up that word shall, but when we look at the legal words on things, they do mean a lot, and the words and or are very specific when we're looking at law. And so I find that interpretation is correct. So with that being said, again, the waivers were approved. The fire department, the experts that we rely on in this situation, agreed to this particular waiver. And so, again, if I had seen a deviation or disagreed with an interpretation, that may have been something to really look at. But I find that we have already approved these. When we look at the very specific criteria that is for approving a final plat, it is to be consistent with the preliminary plan. I find this to be consistent with the preliminary plan. And again, going back and trying to change things that were specifically dealt with during that preliminary plan in the absence of any great discrepancy or difference in circumstance, I cannot find that this has not met the criteria. So I think that I am in support of this application.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Mr. County Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Vanderwerf, if I heard you right, I think that you had said 10 conditions and 2 notations?
That's correct, and I see those on page 35 and 36.
And I can confirm that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to make a motion to approve this final plat, Hay Creek Valley subdivision, with the noted 10 conditions and 2 notations. I have 2 additional comments that are not related specifically to the motion, but as we go through a land use reassessment and making sure that our land development code really do great work for our citizens, I would like the staff to consider modeling approaches to deal with some of the evacuation requirements that we might have with regard to fire risk. I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's a lot of cost in it or if there's not a lot of cost in it, but it feels to me like we really should have a good scientific understanding about what we have as far as fire risk. And then the second one, again, not related to the motion, is based on what I see, not specifically related to this particular subdivision, but with relation to Hay Creek Road in general, I would like to work with the staff to see if there's any way to get a second ingress or egress in and out of that road, notwithstanding anything that would be informed to us out of the modeling. Just on a heuristic basis, it looks like this area does need that. So I'd like to work with staff on these 2 points. So I have made a motion to approve item 8.
Second.
Okay, that has been moved and seconded. Any further comments or discussion today? Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the comments from Commissioner Vanderwerf, and of course, life and safety are the primary purposes of what we do here, and they're very important. I do want to state, however, I agree that there's always room to learn more, especially when we're talking about evacuation. At the same point, I want to also put on the record that I don't think that we have not taken that into consideration, actually. We could change the code every year. There's a phrase, good people can disagree. When we have experts in a room, we can get lots of various different perspectives. I don't think the debate will ever be settled, and debate is good. I will also say, after talking to our previous Office of Emergency Management director at length over many of these issues, not related to this particular application, but at length over the general concept. I think that we cannot forget that, yes, we can do some modeling, but you can't model for every situation, and that is where our Office of Emergency Management is very important in an actual emergency. Where something comes from, how fast it's moving, what the wind speed is, what the temperature is. There are so many factors to consider in all of these situations. And one of the things that our Office of Emergency Management considers when an emergency happens is how long it takes to evacuate. And so, you know, when an emergency happens or a fire happens, especially when it's further away, they are more aggressive at evacuating areas when they are thinking about all of those conditions. And so I don't want to leave today's hearing thinking that this criteria is even the most important part of an emergency situation, because the actions of our Office of Emergency Management become incredibly important in how they make notifications, how they request evacuations, and all of those factors go into one of those situations. And I think that I just want to express some confidence in that office for what the work is that they do, knowing, again, there's lots of room for debate. We should always keep looking and always doing better, but we are always going to have debates around this issue, and we do have to recognize that we cannot model for every situation. We do have to weigh risk, and I think that this is a calculated risk, specifically when you talk about the length of the road and the things that we went through and talked about. You know, everyone's not entering the road. Can you say 25 homes on any length of road? That would be a very silly way to look at this, in my opinion. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, and I just wanted to make sure we don't get to the point saying it hasn't been accounted for. I think it has been accounted for. I think our Office of Emergency Management has been very clear to me when we've talked about each one of these things, and it is something that we account for, and our emergency office continues to be an important part of.
Commissioner Van Der Werf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll come back just very briefly to what I think is important, and that is to really actually do some of this modeling. I'll just give you an example. Sometimes modeling gives you answers that you don't actually see just heuristically by looking at a project. So I'm going to, this is all just postulation, again, what a model would try to find. So it might be, we were talking about there are different access points to Hay Creek, and if everybody accesses those points at the same time, they all may be able to get on Hay Creek and then be able to evacuate. But here's the other side of this coin that I think is potentially a risk. So when you get to the eastern edge of Hay Creek and it starts to go on other roads to access I-25, you've got dense development north and east of Beaver Creek that will definitely produce congestion on that road. So what the real issue might not be, and again, this is what the modeling would do to inform us, it might not be getting out of your housing development on Hay Creek. It might be a backup at the eastern edge of Hay Creek trying to access I-25. So doing a model of this might actually provide good information that's the real safety consideration for evacuation in this area might be about adding infrastructure very close to I-25 so that in a broader way, the entire region can evacuate more effectively. Now, this is the problem that we have, is because it's not been modeled, we don't have really a scientific validation or invalidation about what is the best answer for evacuations here. But I do see that for some of the residents, I saw them shaking their head yes. It looks to me like they do have concern about evacuating on the eastern edge of Hay Creek and what kind of backup might be there. Heuristically, again, that means a non-scientific approach. That might actually be a challenge there. But again, because it's not modeled, we don't have a good answer. So really, the best way to deal with evacuation here after modeling, it might inform us that we need infrastructure improvements next to I-25, and that the road itself is actually going to be adequate. This is the problem that we have. We don't know the answer. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
And one of the other solutions I would recommend to the developer in working with this is if you could put in a phone call to the Forest Lakes HOA, because now with the development of Willow Springs and Monument, there's a whole second route out of Forest Lakes. And those are both very important routes, because if the fire is coming over the way Waldo Canyon did, you'll want to go north to exit that subdivision. If it's coming from Palmer Lake, you would want to go south. And I think that that's really important in those cases of a fire. I know I do actually enjoy attending when our Office of Emergency Management does a fire evacuation or preparation. Open house at the high schools. I remember talking to a young lady from California. I wasn't that interested in talking to her dad. I was more concerned as to whether or not she was home alone after school. And I said, if a fire comes over the mountain, what are you going to do? Are you going to try to call your dad, or you are going to have a route in your mind that you need to leave on? I think it's very important that every single parent has a discussion with their kids on that. When the fire comes, where are you going to meet? Because kids shouldn't be at home waiting for parents to come and get them. That often, as we saw in Waldo Canyon, that didn't become an option for the parents to go back in. The people in the home must get out. And I think at the end of the day, we always need to defer to personal responsibility as well when it comes time to evacuate for a fire. And anyone living in, even when my kids were young and we didn't really live, we lived in an urban neighborhood, did not really live in an area where a fire was or could be. We always had a place where we would meet, and they always knew where that place was. And that's something that I think that is important for every parent to communicate to their child. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? So, you know, we have a difficult job up here. And I always appreciate when a group of concerned citizens and residents and the people at the top of that organizational chart that we deeply respect do let us know how the decisions that we make are impacting them, how the decisions that are put into our code actually play out and are affecting your ability to enjoy life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I also, you know, most of the time when we consider these land use issues, we're talking about, you know, where does one person's property rights, where do one person's property rights end and where do others begin? That's most often what we're dealing with. I actually greatly appreciate that that you all are addressing, you clearly respect that, and I appreciate that that we're talking about something that is worth really looking at and discussing today that's not going to infringe on other rights. So in looking at, again, the wording of the Land Development Code, the specific criteria that consumed the majority of the conversation today reads like this. Necessary services, including police and fire protection, recreation, utilities, and transportation systems, are or will be made available to serve the proposed subdivision. Now, with this particular application, I believe that the applicant has gone through great lengths to ensure that those things have been taken care of. And another point I wanted to just quickly address too is that while it is our job to be very concerned with life and safety of the holistic community and to have the bigger picture in mind up here, we have to, when an application is in front of us, take each application on its own merits and evaluate it by its own prescribed criteria for where it is in that process. And I can't find any indication that that hasn't been done and hasn't been met. So to clarify, I absolutely believe that this meets the criteria. Do I think that there are other things we can do to, in a future land development code revision, address some of these things that aren't, that make these decisions difficult, to incorporate, this is a very, very unique one, basically because of the topography, geography, and the boundaries. So I would love for future things to look at and consider a consistent way to apply this, and make sure that we are also ensuring for the health and safety. But as Commissioner Williams said at the beginning of her comments as well, the fact that the fire protection district in that geography and that would be serving this area has signed off on it, and that their requirements have also been met, I believe that I will be voting to approve this. Okay, any final comments? With that, I will call a vote. Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf?
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 4-0 with Commissioner Gonzalez excused. Okay. If it suits the board, I think, can we move directly into item number 9? Okay. Item number 9.
Item number 9 is the Annexation Impact Report, T-Cross Ranches LLC, Amara Edition number 1-23, acknowledgement of an Annexation Impact Report for the Amara Edition number 1-23 annexation. Pursuant to the state statute, the Board of County Commissioners does not approve or deny an Annexation Impact Report. The report provided by the City of Colorado Springs notifies the county of the annexation request and describes potential impacts in very general terms. The property consists of 3,172.796 acres and is zoned RR5, residential rural, A5, agricultural, and A35, agricultural. The property is located near the northeast corner of Squirrel Creek Road and Link Road and south of Bradley Road. The annexation request is recommended for approval by the City of Colorado Springs Planning Commission on April 16, 2024, with a vote of 7-2. And is scheduled to be heard before the City of Colorado Springs City Council on May 28, 2024. Parcel numbers 45000000125, 082, 015, 023, 460000053, 55000000204, 031, 039, 420, 419, and 552700011. Commissioner District Number 4, File ANX 248, Ryan Hauser, AICP Planner 3, Planning and Community Development.
Hello. So again, for the record, my name is Ryan Hauser, planner with El Paso County Planning Community Development, and this is case number ANX 248 for the consideration of the Amara Annexation Impact Report. With Department of Public Works, we have Senior Engineer Jeff Rice, and again, for the record, to those who may be watching remotely, if you've not provided a name and a phone number, please email that information to pcdhearings@elpasoco.com if you wish to participate. So this request is for the board to acknowledge the Annexation Impact Report for the Amara Edition numbers 1-23 annexation. So I won't repeat too much into the record of what was already stated. However, I do want to state that per requirements, any annexation requests for property greater than 10 acres is required to submit an annexation impact report and the code does identify specific requirements of that report. So the total property consists of about a little over 3,000 acres, and I will show some maps later in the presentation to provide a little bit more context. And again, as was previously stated, that the request was recommended for approval by the City Planning Commission on April 16th with a vote of 7-2 and is scheduled to be heard by City Council on May 28th. I won't read these requirements into the record, but I do want to pause on this slide for a second to identify that these are the criteria points. These are the requirements that the report shall contain per section 10.1.4b of the Land Development Code. Staff has provided an analysis of these bullet points in the staff report, and staff did not identify any deficiencies with regards to the bullet points contained in the annexation impact report. This set of criteria points, these are the standards for review of an annexation impact report. So the BOCC shall evaluate the report for the following bullet points. And again, I have also copied and pasted these bullet points into the staff report and provided a staff response to each of these. Per the same as the previous list, staff has not noted any deficiencies with regards to the report meeting these requirements. So I don't want to go too in depth into this, otherwise we'll be talking until the end of the day. So the bulk of my presentation will likely consist of more background and context for this project, as opposed to a specific analysis of these bullet points, since that analysis is provided in the staff report. The location of the property is shown on this slide with the black hatched. Unfortunately, I didn't modify the boundary here for the city boundaries, but this gray area is municipal boundary for the city of Colorado Springs and the city of Fountain. For just a little bit more context and location in relation to existing development patterns, there is quite a bit of development going on in this area. This PUD zoned portion here is the Lorson Ranch PUD, which does contain a similar urban density to the proposed density in the Amara Master Plan, which is a part of their annexation impact report. This PUD to the north of Lorson Ranch is not an active PUD, but we do have currently in review a new sketch plan. It's called the Rolling Meadows Bull Hill Sketch Plan, and it does contemplate a similar level of development that's being proposed in the Amara annexation area, and it's a similar urban level, urban scale residential development, similar to what we would normally expect to see in property that's being annexed into the city. This property just to the south of Lorson Ranch, this RR5 rural residential zoned property, this is the Peaceful Valley Lake Estates. This has been established for quite some time, and that's a rural residential development located within the county. And then one more thing that I wanted to mention on this slide that's important to note for this particular proposal is you may notice the city of Colorado Springs boundary ends here. It actually ends at this corner, and then this portion is actually located within the city of Fountain. So it would appear that this property is discontiguous to the city of Colorado Springs boundary, and then there is a gap here between these two portions of the property that are proposed for annexation. And I do have another slide later on that will have a more detailed depiction of how they're proposing to achieve contiguity, but it is a twofold request that they have where they're proposing so the reason it's, trying to gather my thoughts, the reason it's annexations 1 through 23 is because they are proposing 23 concurrent annexation requests in order to achieve the contiguity requirements. The first 10 of those concurrent annexation requests consist of portions of Bradley Road in order to achieve a flagpole annexation for this northerly property. I I believe it's 11 through 14 contain this property, and then the remainder consist of the rest of the property. So they propose these concurrent annexation requests, one after the other, to achieve the contiguity via the flagpole up here, and then the gap between these two properties. Per Colorado revised statutes, contiguity can be interrupted if the property interrupting the contiguity is owned either by the state or the federal government. So this land is actually owned by the state of Colorado, which enables them to quote unquote jump the state land to achieve contiguity. So even though it would appear that this property is not contiguous to the city boundary, per those provisions in the state statutes, they are still able to achieve a semblance of contiguity through the jumping of the state land.
I think you're going to get to this because it sounds like you came pretty close to it already. On the jumping of that property, is that one of the Section 16s that the state owns for school boards? Or do you know what that state property is?
I think I believe it's open space, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
And I don't want to say anything on the record that's wrong.
I can look on my favorite website, the assessor's website.
We can do some research too.
But then too, I also was wondering where they were getting the contiguity. You said you're going to address that. Thank you.
So the next two slides, more close up, illustrate some of the more unique components of this request. One of the bullet points for the criteria for evaluation of an annexation impact report indicates that the annexation shouldn't create any instances where there are enclaves that may not be easily annexable into a jurisdiction. I wanted to highlight this area because it does create two enclaves, one on the north side here and one on the south side here, between what would essentially be property within Colorado Springs, and then the blue on the screen here is the city of Fountain. So they would be creating these enclaves. However, it's staff's understanding that it would not be difficult to annex these properties in the future if need be, if that makes sense. And that's a key component of that criteria point, that it's not just that they can't create enclaves. The idea is that they can't create enclaves that can't easily be incorporated at some point in the future. And then the second point, this is what I had mentioned earlier, is just a close-up on the flagpole annexation so you can see how they're achieving contiguity for the north side. And then it's a little difficult to see, but these gray lines are the parcel boundary lines, and it's this piece here that extends between here and then this property to the south is where the annexation picks back up. But it's this land, and then it comes out and moves further to the east. And it's about, I want to say about 3,000 to 4,000 acres. That's the land that's owned by the state that they're jumping over. So at this point, unless you had any further questions for planning at this time, I would like to turn it over to Jeff to discuss the engineering components.
Morning, Commissioners. Jeff Rice with engineering. So when we get to the development stages, this is where these are going to apply. The stormwater detention and water quality will need to be provided to mitigate the downstream impacts to the downstream properties and drainage ways. We have recommended and discussed with the city a drainage basin planning study that should be provided for that Upper Williams Creek drainage basin, and I'll have a slide that shows that, which would be a multi-jurisdictional involvement due to the city of Colorado Springs, Fountain, and El Paso County, and this project kind of being in the middle of that area. There will be impacts to the county roads when this area develops, unless all of the roads are annexed. The main concerns are Mesa Ridge Parkway west of Mark Scheffel, and which actually has a PPRTA project going on right now to widen that to 4 lanes. But as far as when development happens, we would look at any traffic studies and what those impacts are to whatever roads remain under county jurisdiction. There could be potential cooperation agreements as far as for improvements if those are needed due to this development. and those roads remain in the county. This is just kind of a big conglomeration of a bunch of different things. The Mara annexation is kind of the pink area in the middle here. And then the one that's south of Bradley Road up next to the proposed Bull Hill, like Ryan mentioned, that we have a sketch plan under review for. Lorson Ranch is this really dense looking, all these yellow parcels here. The red lines, I'll go to the next slide. So this slide shows the roads in the area and the kind of the staff's anticipated ultimate configuration as far as ownerships. The blue are county roads, and we would, at this point, as far as we know, those will be present and future roads. Bradley Road east of this, going east of the proposed annexation. Like I mentioned Mesa Ridge Parkway between Mark Scheffel and, sorry, I'm looking at this slide right now. So, sorry, this other blue line is Fontaine through Lorson Ranch. So there could be some traffic that uses that Fontaine Boulevard through Lorson Ranch. The yellow line is kind of I don't want to say no man's land, but that's the piece of Meridian Road that would go through the state-owned parcel. So our assumption is that that would be annexed or taken over by the city at some point also, just due to the connection for these pieces of the annexation. The orange roads are City of Fountain roads that we would anticipate could remain the City of Fountain, and the brown roads are Fountain roads that we anticipate could be taken over by Colorado Springs due to the amount of development here. And then the red roads are the proposed and future city roads. City currently controls Mark Scheffel from Peaceful Ridge and going north, and that's in the process of being deeded. I'm not sure where that's at, but that's being deeded to the city for their ownership. Bradley Road, kind of the same situation. They maintain the road to, I think it's Hammers Road. It's a little bit east of where Meridian Road would go through. There are little pieces of green roads here that are in, like the piece of Bradley Road is in process of being annexed by the city. So that would be one of the ones that would sooner be annexed by the city. And then Fontaine Boulevard, there's two segments in the county on the ends that we would also anticipate would be annexed at some point once there's a trigger or once there's agreements for the city to develop or annex those. So I think I went over all those. So this is the drainage. Sorry, this is kind of a big
Commissioner
slide
Vanderwerf.
too. Yes, thank you. I've got a question. If you go back one chart and just, with regard to the anticipated annex roads for annexing that are county roads presently, I think that's the green and the yellow.
Mm-hmm.
We getting good conversations and cooperation from the city with regard to all of those possibilities?
We have on Bradley, I'm not sure about Fontaine if we've really gotten there because most of the traffic using Fontaine is Lorson Ranch at this point. But I think with City of Fountain development that's occurring south of Fontaine, they're working with the City of Colorado Springs to improve that portion in the middle. And I think once that gets going, that'll kind of lead to the conversation about the two ends of Fontaine between Powers and Mark Scheffel and kind of just getting that all under City of Colorado Springs control.
Okay, I would be hopeful that that would all happen. If it doesn't happen, or if there isn't otherwise some type of an agreement with regard to like snow plowing and so forth, these will all be problematic areas.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably a current agreement for the snow plowing because we wouldn't want to just do the ends, and Colorado Springs really has nothing down there right now. So I would assume without looking at that agreement that the county plows that whole.
Another question for you, but it may be something that you're planning on addressing later, and so my apologies if I'm jumping the gun, but is there a perspective from the City of Fountain with regard to these annexations? I know that it was originally proposed to them, they decided that they couldn't accept it. Are they okay accepting it, frustrated, don't know?
As far as I know, they had concerns about the traffic that would be going west through Fountain. And I'm not sure kind of where they're at with the City of Colorado Springs on that, but I know that was a concern of theirs.
Okay. So that's the main thing that you're aware of that they may have expressed. Oops, looks like I might get some more comments.
For the record, Megan Harrington, Planning Director. So I understand your question to be, how is the City of Fountain feeling about annexation and the overall impacts?
Yes, because, on the one hand, it's almost like the city of Colorado Springs is starting to encircle Fountain. And then if they have plans on trying to grow that may impact that, then again, on the other side of the coin, they might feel like they can't grow because they don't feel they've got access to water. So maybe they're just good with it.
So my answer to you will be a bit anecdotal because it's based on conversations that I've had with the City of Fountain. I have not seen their recent letters, but I know that there are some concerns about this annexation. When the City of Fountain was looking at their 3-mile plans for future annexation, this was definitely a property that they had intended would be annexed into the City of Fountain. Residents out here in the first phases will be utilizing the City of Fountain roads and their consumer conveniences within the city. And so I know that was a concern about how they were made whole on that impact. I know that the City of Fountain was at the Planning Commission hearing for this item, and they did not testify. So I don't know overall where they stand at this point, but there had been some serious conversations about the impacts to the City of Fountain.
Thank you.
I have a question too on the roads. When an annexation occurs, and I guess my biggest concern here is the traffic that is going to be, I don't really like the word anticipated annexation because that doesn't guarantee that anyone will take it over.
Right.
Do we collect the road impact fee when they generate these? No, because it goes over to the city. And then the other question you may have an answer to, but it was Peaceful Valley, the area where we had flooding and the residents, is that the one where the residents did not have an exit to their neighborhood?
That could be. There's kind of a Texas crossing in between that north area of Peaceful Valley and where Lorson Ranch is. And that, I'm sure if there was flooding, that was an issue for people to get out of there.
Yeah, because I remember we had, I think there's only one exit to that, and it would be nice, but I don't see where they would connect, in all honesty.
Right.
If, when we sent that over, if there was a way to get an emergency exit out of Peaceful Valley, that would be nice for the next time we have a road washout.
Yeah, I think ultimately there's opportunities on the east side. I'm not sure because there's the piece of property between Fountain and this annexation, but I think there's opportunities in the future when those areas develop.
Yeah, and I don't want cut-through traffic on Peaceful Valley because I know that's important to them, but I want some kind of, thank you.
Mm-hmm. As far as drainage, the focus on this is kind of the blue colored area in the middle. This is Upper Williams Creek and the Williams Creek drainage basin. And the property with the red dots, if you can see that, is the proposed annexation. And that's kind of in the middle of the basin, but at this point, there's not very much development besides the Peaceful Valley rural lots there in this basin. So if this amount of urban development goes in and all that drainage is going downstream, it's going to be an issue to kind of look at what the developments or the improvements that need to be down there for that amount of volume and runoff going downstream. So that's why we recommended the drainage basin planning study. This is just another road showing the current state of the roads from our GIS. The blue roads are county roads, the purple are in Lorson Ranch especially, and over here are under construction, which they would be county roads when accepted. And then the red or pinkish color is not county maintained roads at this point in time, which could be either Fountain on the south side and Colorado Springs on the north side. This is the same thing, just I didn't know if it would look better or not, but a little bit more specific on some of those, if there's any questions on where the site is there. And then this, I think, is just kind of to close, showing the overall, I overlaid Lorson Ranch and then the Bull Hills Rolling Meadow on this site to show how it fits in with the developer's drawing that they had. Also to note is the future reservoir site out here to the east on Bradley Road, so that would be right next to that annexed area on the north part. And the city of Colorado Springs does own that land, I believe, at least most of it. So. Any other questions for engineering?
Any questions? Thank you.
I didn't have anything else to add at this time, so I would open it up if the commissioners had any questions for staff at this time.
Do we have any questions? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, this is just really receiving the report and getting an understanding about what the City of Colorado Springs is doing. I appreciate the information and the data from the staff. And so I don't really have any questions, but just it does look like a very unusual annexation. Just the configuration of it and where it's located and so forth just seems unusual to me. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Vanderwerf addressed one thing I was going to point out before we give any formal feedback on this, which is that we are receiving this and the information at this time, and there's no formal action needed. But we are welcome to comment on any pieces of it. I think Commissioner Vanderwerf has said it. I think we're paying attention to the things we need to pay attention to when we receive any of these annexation impact reports, which is, the roads coming into and out of areas that are our responsibility. So I'm comfortable with really no additional comments.
Yes, my only additional comment would be I want to, and this should be addressed in the drainage basin study, but I do want to make sure that the water coming off the development does not go into Peaceful Valley. It goes around or wherever they're going to send it, that they do the appropriate drainage up there. And I will also state I do not envy City Council to have to make this decision. This one's going to be a tough one for them, I know. And, well, I expect, I don't know that. Do we just do a motion to acknowledge receipt?
Commissioner, I don't believe that you need a motion of any variety for this. You're just receiving the report.
Okay.
That's already taken place.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments or direction for staff at this time? Okay. Hearing none. Item number 10.
Item number 10 is department and committee reports, non-action items, and there are none.
Item 11.
Item 11 is the addendum, and there are no addendums today.
Item 12.
Item 12 is executive session, and there is no request for an executive session.
We are adjourned.